Welcome to Ichiraku Ramen, and thank you for joining me for another journey into the world of shinobi. Before we begin, I want to give a huge thank you to everyone who listens, supports the channel, and enjoys these stories. Today's story is the second part of Child of Hate. What happens when the world's ultimate weapon decides he no longer wants to be controlled, he wants to rule? Betrayed by their own father and thrown to the snake, Naruto and his twin sister Naruko spent their childhood cowering in a cage deep within the hidden sound. In the darkest moments of Orochimaru's twisted experiments, they shared a single, beautiful dream: to escape and build a utopia, a kingdom hidden in the skies. But when the world violently takes Naruko away from him, Naruto's dream of peace shatters into a nightmare of vengeance. Broken, mutated, and pushed beyond the limits of human power, Naruto embraces the darkness they forced upon him. Ascending to godlike power, the Dark Emperor sets his sights on the ultimate goal: global domination, and the total destruction of the shinobi world that wronged his sister. They made him a monster. Now they will bow to a god. This is a fan-made story inspired by the world of Naruto. All characters in the original universe belong to their respective creators. This narration is created for entertainment purposes as part of a transformative storytelling experience. The story itself was written by Foy the Snooze Button, and full credit goes to the original author. If you would like to read the original version, the link to this story is included in the video description below. If you like my content and want to keep up with future updates, hit that subscribe button and don't forget leave a like if you enjoyed the video. It not only helps me but helps with YouTube algorithm. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy. Chapter 7. Spring hasn't changed much, Kakashi noted as he waltzed through the capital gates quickly. His dull one eye looked around from under his dog A&BU mask. He signed over his shoulder to his team of 4 jogging behind him. Go and gather information. Meet me back here in 30 minutes. They saluted and disappeared in different directions to ask the citizens of the country the detail of the invasion from their perspective, and compare it with that of their captain when they met so that would at least understand what sort of threat they were up against. As the Sharingan holder looked around, he didn't notice any major change in the capital to signify that it was overrun besides the large flag that waved at the top of the Spring Daimyo's palace under the country's flag. The flag had a deep red background with the kanji for sky written in golden strokes. There were also scuff marks on the ground from obvious struggle, and as he came closer to the palace he saw that there were blacksmiths mending the hinges of the great door, even if it didn't seem like it had been ripped off its hinges but rather they were checking and refortifying it. The masked man entered the palace, ignoring the workers that ran about to reorganize their lives, and proceeded to the woman sitting on the throne. Koyuki had a sad frown etched onto her beautiful face, and the actress closed her eyes at the memory of how easily her personal guards were dispatched. She opened them when she heard a polite cough. Greetings, Lady Koyuki. I am Dog of the Konoha A&BU. The Yondaime sent me here to see if your country still needs help fighting those Tsukai forces. Just you? She said with a raised eyebrow. Several squads of my comrades are stationed outside the country. The woman sighed and slumped a little more into her throne. Regardless of that, it is too late. They have already gone. Lady Koyuki, if I may. Her fingers twitched on her armrest, telling him he was permitted to speak. Can I know more about this Tsukai forces so that we can better know how to defeat them? The actress was silent for a few long moments, staring at the dog-masked man with gradually widening eyes. They cannot be defeated. The sole reason my messenger even reached Konoha is because their king was merciful enough to allow it. Her eyes dulled at the memory of the almighty king of the army of monsters. Their king, he was able to crush the heads of 3 of my guards with nothing but the air and without a serious thought. She pointed at her neck, where a thin red line circled around it like a necklace. He did this to me, without even coming near me. Lady Koyuki, this all does not mean he cannot be killed. He is still human. No, he is not. None of the Tsukai soldiers are human, and I believe the civilians are not human as well. I'm sorry, ma'am, but we still need information. Can you tell us what you know about the Tsukai king? The man and his forces didn't loot the kingdom or usurp the daimyo and take control. Then it was less an invasion and more of attacking a country because they felt like it. Making it more or less a hobby. The woman wilted into her seat and rubbed her still sore neck. He said his name is Naruto dash. The man's eye became alarmed and he burst out. Naruto? Koyuki looked at the Hatake with squinted eyes, the rubbing motion on her neck slowed to a stop. Are you familiar with that name? Describe him, please. He had red hair and pale skin. It was like he did not know how to express himself because I could see he wanted to smile or grin more but he didn't know how to. I know this because I'm an actress. She then snapped her fingers. The security cameras inside the palace were still working after he left. I think he didn't know about them. She snapped her fingers and a white-haired boy in his late teens wearing thick glasses and casual clothing ran up to his daimyo and presented a small handheld device with a flat screen that was just as big as both of his hands cupped together. The woman thanked the boy and tapped the screen twice. It lit up, and she swiped across it once with her pointer finger, and tapped again. She closed her eyes and gave the masked Konoha ninja the device. It was a video recording from all four corners of the ceiling. When the door opened up easily after all the materials used to block it had magically shifted aside, dozens of soldiers in red shirts and black pants with golden under armor stomped in and stood by the walls. A woman in rainbow-colored hair then marched in a swivel to her right, placed her hand over heart in sync with the other soldiers and tilted her head a little bit down, though the soldiers by the walls didn't do so but rather kept their eyes on the defiant spring daimyo and her guards. Then Naruto walked in and Kakashi's heart almost stopped in shock. He held back from stumbling away as he watched as each step the boy took towards the woman rattled the building to its very core, and the head of a guard exploded in a geyser of blood and brain matter. The actress's face turned a deep shade of gray as an invisible force grabbed hold of her neck. Naruto took his time walking to her, blowing up to more heads before the guards finally got a clue that he was the cause and prepared to attack but were swiftly killed by the guards lining the walls with various weapons to their heads. The golden-armored soldiers dropped their hands. Somehow Kakashi felt like these soldiers lining the walls were mostly ninjas. The rejected son of the Yondaime Hokage stopped before the woman and gently placed his hand on her head, releasing her from his hold. There was no sound but the war veteran as well as Star Shinobi could feel chills run up and down his spine at the mildly amused face of the actress. He was telling me that he knew about my message to Konoha, the woman said from her throne, her face in her hands and shivering at the memory. That he predicted I would send on but he wanted Konoha to get the message. She looked up to the Hatake, tears devoid in her eyes and her face eerily calm. And I had a feeling that he could just as easily kill them with a snap of his fingers. The man silently listened as he kept watching the thought to be dead son of the fourth. Naruto said something over his shoulder. He knew I was about to stab him, and he still didn't kill me. The man's hands shook. This wasn't the little bundle of happiness he knew. This was a bitter, sadistic, evil shadow of the child he used to visit every once in a while. He heard from the Yondaime that the twins had been killed and he didn't question it but something in him told him that one of the twins had indeed died. Naruko. It was very obvious that Naruto treasured his sister. Can I have a copy of this video? By all means. The woman said and the same white-haired boy took the device. Kakashi scratched his chin with a deep frown on his face. I need to report this to Minato-sensei. He idly took the tape of the video and rushed out of the palace. He met up with his team, all of which wore grim expressions under their masks, and ran out of Spring. The Tsukai Forces Arena Alpha. The military barracks. The Tsukai Kingdom. Indra Watashi drew the kubikiri from his back and placed it on his shoulder. Small drops of sweat grew on his head as he looked across the training ground, a red-haired teen that stood with his hands to his side and a wistful smile on his face. Make sure you don't hold back, Indra. Naruto called to the platinum rank. I will try my best, my lord. The head of the frontline soldiers said as he bent his right knee and held the handle of his sword with both of his hands though still keeping the massive blade on his right shoulder. Naruto though didn't move from his position. Arena Alpha was a place where silver ranks were tested to see if they were ready to be promoted to gold ranks, So needless to say that the place was so fortified with reinforcement seals that there had to be a separate seal set in place to not destabilize the floating island kingdom. The other promotion arenas, Beta and Gamma, were less reinforced because bronze to silver and copper to bronze respectively because the abilities of the lower ranks were a bit less dangerous than the higher ranks. The other division heads watched from the sidelines, on a row of seats set apart for them and the king of the kingdom to watch over the promotion exams. This time though their king was the one fighting, or rather having a quick eye and body check. Indra grit his teeth and ran to his king, moving so quickly he created a faint black blur of motion that raced towards Naruto, who still hadn't moved. Barely a feet away from him Naruto's black with red ringed eyes pulsed and the world moved to a slow slur. The eagerly watching group of division heads slowed down with it until it all stopped. Naruto observed the man before him, bringing down the head cleaver to split his head open with a stoic expression and a rigid posture. The king pursed his lips and his eyes moved around, noticing that the dust in the air froze completely. He walked behind the man and his legs shot to the back of Indra's knees, forcing him to fall onto his knees, but even still Naruto's quick eyes still saw everything in stillness, like he had mentally clicked reality's pause button. The Rinnegan king then swung his foot and nailed the swordsman on the side of his head, but instead of sending him into the wall the king continued the motion and brought down the division heads to meet the ground in a ground-shaking thud. Naruto stepped back and allowed his eyes to see things like any other person. The division heads collectively blinked in shock when they saw that at one moment Indra was about to open up the head of their king, and then the next their king stood over the body of the man in a flash of red light. It wasn't that his amplified Rinnegan was able to slow down time, but rather he was able to see at such a fast pace that it felt like time had stopped, but rather it moved at a pace far slower than the crawl of a snail. The eyes also allowed him a limited ability to anticipate the next move of his opponent, but that wasn't what he was using at the moment. Naruto's lips twitched upwards when he saw his subordinate grunt as he got back to his feet. He took a few steps back and lifted both of his hands to Indra, motioning him to come at him again. "Come on. If you wanted a practice dummy, then I would have gladly agreed to be that dummy, my king." Indra grunted sourly. His pride hurt that he had been taken out in the blink of an eye. "I apologize, Indra, but that was the quick eye check, now for the body check," Naruto said and again beckoned his loyal till death subordinate to come. "As you wish, my lord." He ran to Naruto and slashed the head cleaver to the side, tearing through the sky towards Naruto's left side. The king lifted his left forearm and blocked the blow. Bright red and yellow sparks rained down after contact, not because Naruto had quickly changed the composition of his arm from normal to a metal Azura Path arm, like he did with his battle against Meitorumi, but rather used his unbreakable obsidian under armor along his arm and fingers to defend against the attack. He stepped back from a palm strike and then jammed his foot into the midsection of the swordsman, driving air out of the man's lungs. Naruto slid around the stunned platinum rank and again kicked the back of his knee, though this time sweeping his feet from under him in a blur of motion and slamming the man into the ground with an axe kick to the neck. Naruto stepped back and dusted down his shirt. "It seems I've still got it," he said before he walked closer to Indra and helped him back to his feet. The division head bowed his head in humility, and Naruto smiled. "You did well." "Thank you, sir." "Go and get yourself fixed up. There is still a festival for you to celebrate." Indra nodded and allowed Karen to gently throw his arm over her shoulder and lead him to the medical bay in the arena. The other division heads trooped to him and fell on one knee, with their right hands over their hearts. Mora, the head of Hunter Ninjas, asked their king, "What will you be doing next, my lord?" Naruto hummed as he looked at them. "I will be going to the ground to perform a few personal missions." He made sure to emphasize personal. "You do not want a guard detail?" Mora asked, fighting the urge to raise his voice at his king. The Rinnegan king waved their concerns away. "The missions I want to go to are of the greatest importance, and I have to do them by myself. That means I do not want a guard detail or any tail following me, am I understood?" The division heads faltered nervously before they bowed their heads. "Yes, sir." "Good. I will be leaving in a few minutes, but make sure my absence isn't noticed. If anyone asks for me, then say that I am not around, simple as that. Yes, sir. I'm sure you are all aware of the protocol if by any chance I am not present to lead. We are to all go about our functions until your return, my king. Hamato, the head of intelligence and interrogation, said in a low grunt, not very happy that his king did not want anyone going with him to the ground. It was not that they doubted their king did not know how to best defend himself, the battle had served to show them he was still fully capable, but rather the itch in them constantly wanted to make sure that their king was okay and in good health. You will all report back to me when I return. When will you return, sir? Yuakuso, head of espionage and infiltration, asked. In 6 days or so. Maybe sooner, maybe later, I'm not very sure. I will relay any change to my scheduled return to you, Hamato. The bald man nodded as Naruto's black with red ringed eyes flicked over to him. Make sure my kingdom is still in one piece when I come back. We swear it on our lives, my king! The division heads chorused, even Karen and Indra, who had returned after healing the latter. The red-haired medic and the black-haired swordsman dropped onto their right knees, like the other division heads, placed their hands over their hearts and made the oath with the others. We will defend the Tsukai kingdom with our lives. As it was their sworn duty, they never really had to verbally profess this because it was a well-known fact. Naruto clapped his hands and waved for them to leave as he began his steady walk to the entrance gate to the mighty floating kingdom. Then I will see you all later. He wasn't going to use the royal vehicle to take him down to the ground but rather fly down. He already had his things packed and sealed into a small segment on his wrist. There was no need to go back to his palace to get his things. His division heads escorted him to the entrance, clearing a path through the gaggle of excitedly murmuring citizens that saw their king in the flesh. A few of them even passed out. Naruto waved to them with a tiny smile and nodded back to the salute the gatekeepers sent him, each one of them standing in a rigid standing position by their post. The 16-year-old Rinnegan holder shook his head when his driver made to enter the royal car, silently telling him that he wouldn't be taking the car. He turned back to look at everyone, the division heads that stood at a row before him, the gatekeepers at attention by their post, and the massive gathering of citizens to see their king. A true smile came to Naruto and he waved to them for the last time before his feet slowly left the ground and he descended down to the ground, much to the uproarious cheers of his people. At the moment, the Tsukai kingdom was floating over the ocean much further away from Uzushio and Kumo but still within lightning country. The king dropped down to the earth, ensured the solid black armor under his short-sleeved red shirt and black pants was still in place before he ran headlong towards Konoha. Day 1, 6 days left. 9:30 p.m. Konoha Graveyard. Kanahigaku no Sato. Fire Country. The Death Reaper Seal. One of 2 existing seals that was able to seal away the strongest-tailed beast on the planet, the 9-tailed fox. No simple seal or vessel was capable of holding the 9 tails for an extended period of time without it being destroyed and the backlash of the unsealing taking its toll on the surrounding environment. The first considered seal was the demonic beast 14-chain shackle seal, which conjured 14 great binders that would hold down all 9 tails of the fox as well as the arms, legs and neck for added measure. It was greatly effective in sealing away the fox as well as ensuring that the beast had no influence on the holder. Quite frankly, it was the more trusted of the 2 existing seals that were able to hold the fox until the death of the holder, where it too would die. The downside was that it took exactly 14 days to draw and shackle the beast inside a holder, which must be Uzumaki because the clan's chakra was proven effective in containing the beast. Each shackle took a whole day and the next shackle had to be fastened immediately after or else the beast would gain freedom. Barely anyone had enough chakra for 3 days of continuous use, much less 14 days of use, beside the much acclaimed Uzumaki clan. But even with this great chakra buff, the user of the seal, an Uzumaki, would die from strain after the 14 shackles had been set in place. Mito was the first person to use this to contain the fox within her after leading the fox away from the fight between Madara Uchiha and her husband, Hashirama Senju, who was also globally known to be the Shodaime Hokage as well as the strongest ninja that ever lived. Kushina Uzumaki was the second person to have this seal used to contain the fox in her. The sealer had to be awake and actively seal the beast for 14 straight days, but also the person the beast was being sealed into. The world watched the effect of having the beast slowly removed and transferred into its second holder, a slow decline into madness before the inevitable death of the sealer. Steady madness waited for the person that slowly removed the seal from within him or her. So what would happen if all 14 shackles were destroyed as one and the tailed beast was savagely torn out of the Jinchuriki? Terrible insanity. This was why Kushina, after fighting in the Third Shinobi War and going on numerous missions that would sooner break the mind of any other person, a strong kunoichi in her own right, lost her mind after her beast had been taken from her. The Death Reaper seal was not too innocent either. The seal could take a relatively short time to draw, but in order to seal the beast into its next holder, the sealer needed to summon the Shinigami, the Death God, to do it. Minato didn't have the chakra to use the 14 shackles, and Kushina was much too insane to lend a hand, so he had no other option but to summon the Death God to separate the Kyuubi's chakra and her soul and seal them into Naruto and Naruko respectively. Before the god could stab his hand through Minato's back to complete the deed, the Yondaime was pushed aside by the Sandaime. No one was aware, but the Shinigami desired to consume the Namikaze's soul very much. The blonde man had created 2 high-S rank abilities, one of which pushed through the realms of mortals into the one of heavenly deities. The Flying Thunder God Seal. A seal, or jutsu, that allowed Minato to travel from one point to another faster than lightning and as many times or as many places as he wanted. This was one of the main reasons Minato was such a feared man over the continent. His ability to seamlessly be in many places at once, adding his taijutsu as well as general jutsu abilities, and the Yondaime was the strongest and fastest living shinobi on the planet. Most even compared him to the likes of Madara and Hashirama. The Death God was all too happy when he was summoned to seal the Kyuubi into the man's twin children, but he was enraged when the older Hokage shoved his dinner out of the way to take his place. The Shinigami could not change the direction of his hand, so he kept going, plunging through the soul of Hiruzen Sarutobi and sealing the Kyuubi into the twins. As punishment for being denied the soul he so much desired to devour, and instead being given a tired old soul, the Shinigami swore to consume either of his children's soul when they died unless he was sated with the soul of any one of the people that he yearned to eat. Those that have cheated death numerous times. This was why Minato didn't care much that Naruko had been killed. Being eaten by the Death God was more merciful than what he had in mind for his children when they returned. Besides, if Konoha had plenty of people that defied death frequently, then it was to his benefit. Dark Rinnegan eyes looked to the tombstone of the third Hokage. Konoha had a long list of people that frequently defied death, so much so that it annoyed the Death God. But the Rinnegan King needed to know who was possibly at the top of that list somehow. He couldn't summon the Shinigami to ask, the price was too high, but he did know someone that possibly knew each and every death-defiant person in Konoha. But before that, Naruto turned his back to the grave of the third Hokage, to a wide area of land sparsely populated with trees and bushes. His black with red ringed eyes shone in the dark as he lifted his left hand, palm open and facing upwards. As his hands rose, the ground trembled lightly, just about enough to alert the Konoha ninjas, but he had that sorted out. He had a shadow clone also make the ground shake far behind him to the east gate of the village. As his hand became level with his hip and rising, the ground cracked open, shaking up the trees and bushes around it. The crack increased as Naruto's hand lifted up to his diaphragm level. When he got to his chest, a wide, dark purple dome peeked out from the ground. After this the shaking stopped abruptly, but Naruto's hand kept rising, revealing a large, purple head of a creature with black with red ringed eyes and a fat, light purple nose. The head had no ears, seeing as a kind of light brown-red cloak helmet covered its head, thick, light purple eyebrows that barely touched the massive nose of the beast. Naruto hummed the Rinnegan ability under his breath. Naraka Path, Summoning Jutsu, King of Hell. It was like the world around him watched in horror as Naruto mentally commanded for the King of Hell to open its mouth, revealing a frightening gaping maw. It had thick, sharp teeth under its upper lip, but the bottom was bare, though there was only darkness inside it. The Rinnegan King was not in the least bit intimidated by the sight. The redhead gingerly dropped his left hand but raised it again with his right up to his belly. A poof of smoke later revealed a clean white body bag about the size of a 10-year-old child. He gently dropped the bag onto the ground as he knelt down on both knees, clenched his eyes shut tightly and took in 3 deep gulps of air before he opened his eyes again and unzipped the body bag. He couldn't suppress the tears from falling down from his eyes when he saw the face of his twin sister, her face set in a peaceful smile. The one she had on after her throat had been slit to put him at ease, but that had failed because her brother futilely thrashed against his captors. The 16-year-old boy sniffed, and his shaking hands went down, gently tucking a strand of red hair over her ear. Naruto was now sobbing quietly, his tears splashing down on the immaculate face of his sister, barely resisting the urge to hug her body. A few minutes of crying over her body, the king pulled down the zip of the body bag, revealing that his sister was in an armless red dress with gold trimmings at the bottom, but not in obsidian underarmor but rather bandages to hide the pain-stacking stitches over her body. Orochimaru and Kabuto did indeed want to incinerate Naruko's body, but not before they conducted a series of tests on her corpse. Naruto recovered her body from Kabuto's section of the lab, slashed up, ripped apart, and devoid of blood. It had taken Naruto months to feed her his blood, because their godfather had said that they were the same blood type, as well as many months of sorrowfully stitching her body together. Only his division heads knew that he had been doing that, but everyone in the kingdom knew that the king had a beloved sister that had been murdered by their dead slave master. Naruto sniffed and rubbed the tears cascading down his face with the back of his hands. The eyes of the king of hell looked down on his master stoically, keeping its massive mouth open. The boy gently picked up his dead sister, easing her out of the body bag, and steadily walked to the gaping king of hell. The king of the Tsukai kingdom knelt down as he got into the mouth of the king of hell and dropped his sister on her back. He stood back up and admired her glowing, peaceful face for a few moments before he walked backwards out of the mouth of the king of hell. The king of hell closed its mouth, and Naruto patiently waited before his patience was awarded when darkness gathered over the head of the king of hell. It was formless but with a pair of evil red eyes. The king did not waver in place as he crossed his arms, meeting the glare of the king of the dead, the Shinigami. 5 years ago Naruto had attempted to use the outer path, samsara of heavenly life technique, an ability of the outer path of the Rinnegan, to revive his sister, but the Shinigami had barred his path and repeated his condition to the king before he could release hold of Naruko's soul. At that time Naruto did not know many people that the Shinigami would want to eat besides his father. Summoning the king of hell was an ability stemming from the Naraka path of Naruto's Rinnegan. It allowed all that it swallowed to be healed and rejuvenated in both mind and body. It was a medic's wet dream. The Rinnegan ability could heal, but it could not resurrect. Naruto would have to tap into the outer path to do that. Unlike when he was younger, he intended to use the outer path before healing his sister. This had inadvertently summoned the death god to inform him of the price for Naruko's soul. This time Naruto wanted to do it right. He wanted his sister to return back to the living with no pain and no trouble. He would heal her body of every and all abnormalities and diseases before placing her soul back inside. The reason the Shinigami was now present was because it had sensed the mortal body of the one he had devoured, or imprisoned within himself. You can only have her soul back when I have the soul of one who frequently defies death. The god of death reminded Naruto, who remained unafraid. The 16-year-old boy narrowed his eyes up to the god and replied, I will have this soul ready for you soon. The Shinigami hovered in the air silently, observing the Rinnegan king. He then said, in a deep voice that would normally drive any other mortal to insanity, I cannot reap your soul because of your Rinnegan. You are very lucky, Naruto. Naruto knew his eyes were special, even by normal standards, but to have the ability to repel the death god's touch? You will give me my sister and I will find one of those that frequently defy death. You are one of them, just so you know. And I am the only one you will never get. The god grumbled sourly, like a pouting child. Bring me the soul and your sister is yours, but if you don't then you will never see your sister again. Fine. The death god disappeared and the king of hell began healing the wounds of the girl inside its mouth, removing the stitches on her body and sealing up the skin, making it as good as new. Though the process of doing this for her whole body might take up to an hour since Naruto had commanded him to take his time to properly fix his sister, more than enough time for the king. Naruto turned back to the grave of the Sandaime, and his lips twitched up in glee. Soon I will have Naruko, and your sacrifice will all be in vain. His black with red ringed Rinnegan flashed in the night, and there were dozens of chakra smoke burst around the head of the king of hell. The smoke cleared to reveal roughly 15 hulking monkeys stationed around the head housing his sister's corpse. All of which had his brand of Rinnegan eyes, he could see through each of them too. The animal path summoned animals all crouched onto the ground and hid their presence as their summoner ran out of the graveyard and into the hidden village. It was ironic how the summoning animals of the dead Sandaime were in some way contributing to destroying the village they once loyally served. The irony almost made Naruto chuckle out loud. 3 minutes later. The hospital. Kanahigaku no Sato. Fire Country. Tsunade Senji yawned loudly and smacked her lips as she pushed her key into the door of her office and twisted, locking it. Being the head doctor/medic of the hospital was hard work. She was in charge of screening and medics, nurses and doctors, make her rounds to ensure everyone was working, check the hospital records for any discrepancies, take charge of patients that were afflicted with severe problems and sift through papers and papers of reports from her subordinates. Today was particularly taxing on the Senju because Konohamaru, the late Sandaime's son, and Hanabi, the Hyuga clan head's youngest child, had gotten into a vicious fight over some ridiculous playing card. There were many casualties in the children's wing because of this fight, but thankfully no one had died. Sasuke had gotten a severe concussion from Minato Jr. after the latter bashed his head into the wall many times because the former had attempted another Chidori on his turn back. Asuma and Guy had torn their calves during a spar. A few genin thought it was good idea to prank a teammate by pouring powdered ghost peppers into her pants. Lastly, Kushina had stubbed her toe on a door as she entered Inoichi's office for a mental evaluation. Needless to say, Tsunade was beginning to regret agreeing to become the head medic. Damn her guilty conscience. With Kushina losing even more of her mind, the mournful Senju found less of a reason to stay alive but more of a reason to atone for her ineffectiveness to save her family. The main reason she stayed in Konoha was to look after her niece, Kushina. The medic sharply looked up when the lips flickered. Strange. Her lips quirked down, but she shrugged it off. Tsunade slipped the key into her pocket and began her trek out of the hospital, already making bar-hopping plans. The building was fairly silent, with just a few patients roaming around and in the company of her staff. Technically, she wasn't supposed to leave until they were all asleep, but the woman felt very tired and in the need of a break from all the noise. She stopped outside of the hospital and sighed deeply. Katsu. The woman didn't even lift her hands to cut the genjutsu. The world around her wavered and thinned before she realized that she was on the empty roof of the hospital, looking ahead of her at a shadowy figure that stood with his back to her and looking at the Hokage's monument. Using AC-rank genjutsu on a jounin as experienced as I am. Quite frankly, I'm insulted. The person, she realized, had his arms crossed. He shifted slightly and spared a look over his shoulder before his eyes went back to the monument. She tried not to step back when she saw his eyes were black with red rings, a painful reminder of a child she once knew with purple and black rings. And yet you still went along with it. His voice was breezy, she noticed, but not quite enough for her not to hear him. It was a calm night. The stars were blinking in the sky with the waning crescent moon. I wanted to see who had the balls to put an illusion over me. I see. He hummed offhandedly. I'm gonna make this simple and straightforward. Who are you? I am, the person said and waved his right hand flippantly. An old memory. What's that supposed to mean? She said and crossed her powerful arms, ever ready to turn the figure's head into a smear on the ground at a moment's notice. Yes? The person didn't answer her question, but rather threw a question that very nearly unsettled her. Is it true you enjoy lying, Tsunade? I don't know what you're talking about. Now answer my question. A good poker face is the key to winning a game of cards, or so I hear, and burying the truth under several mountains of lies is a good way to hide the pain of loss and dread decaying your soul. Is that not so? Listen up, whoever you are. If you don't start making any sense right now, I'm going to paint this roof red with your blood. The person shook his head. I came to ask a few innocent questions. After that I will leave you be. For now. I still don't know who you are. And you will not find out for now. He turned around and her whole body locked in place as his godly eyes leveled on her own. First we need to go somewhere. What dash? She ground as all bodily movements left her, forcing her to stand rigidly in place. Her eyes looked down to her immobile arms and legs before they flicked up to the shadowy figure, who was now facing her, but there was still not enough light to illuminate his body. Take her and follow me. There was a large blast of chakra smoke behind her, and she was summarily picked up by the back of her shirt by a sharp beak. A drill-beaked bird that had the eyes of its summoner flapped its mighty wings 3 times before it flew into the air after its master, who was rocketing through the sky, throwing an illusion around that he was a shooting star. No one saw him kidnap Tsunade or saw the chakra smoke because Naruto was using a much higher-ranked genjutsu to both hide his presence as well as the drill-beaked bird. I will explain this as best and as nicely as I can. The figure began as he mentally ordered the bird to gently drop the Sannin onto her feet. The bird pulled its wings back to its body and shuffled back to hide in the shade of a tree. The woman saw that the figure had a little bit more form to show he was in a short-sleeved shirt and black pants, though she wondered whether or not he was barefoot or in a pair of really thin sandals. The other thing she observed was the massive rise from the ground behind the speaker on his right. He held up a finger when Tsunade was about to begin yelling obscenities, her mouth clamped shut as if an invisible hand was placed over her lower face. I would appreciate it if you kept quiet. That was when the rise in the ground shivered and a pair of black with red ringed eyes opened up close to the top, a large light purple nose flared under it, and thick light purple eyebrows sprouted out from above the powerful eyes. If she had been placed on the other side of this thing, then she might be able to see its face, as well as her captors, in the light cast by those still awake in the village. But all she could see in the dim light was the awe-inspiring eyes, the nose and eyebrows, and then the mouth opened and the Senju's eyes widened in horror as its mouth gaped impossibly wide, showing a darkness inside it that was so deep and so palpable it made her gulp. Not that she would ever find out, but on the other side of the King of Hell was another face, which was where Naruko's body was being healed. For now, though, Naruto commanded for another face to be created on the back of its head. If I ask you a question and you do not answer it with 100% honesty, then that would rip out your tongue and drag your soul to hell. This was to his advantage because he would instantly get the memories of the Sannin, which would add up to Orochimaru's memories, making 2 Sannin memories. The woman was now visibly shaking, more from how hollow the boy's voice and also how terrifying it would be to be plunged into eternal darkness by this terrible beast. If you answer my questions with a question, your soul will go to hell. She swallowed thickly and closed her eyes tightly. If you answer my question cryptically or vaguely, then your soul will go to hell. Breathing suddenly became hard for the war veteran. She was trained by the Sandaime Hokage and had fought the likes of Hanzo the Salamander, but never in her life had she ever met a person as intimidating as this mysterious figure who had control of that nightmare-inducing monster. If you make light of a question I asked, then your soul goes to hell. If you do not answer a question, your soul goes to hell. His own red-ringed eyes at her from the King of Hell. Do you understand? Tsunade summoned as much pride she had in her body and tilted her chin up. Naruto's eyes narrowed but eased up when she whispered, Yes. The teen was mildly surprised he didn't need to prove himself, but he regained composure and asked, Who are the strongest shinobi currently in this village, Konoha? Name 5. Minato Namikaze, Shikakunara, Chuza Akimichi, Might Guy and Asuma Sarutobi. Who are the strongest retired shinobi in the village? Name 5. The 3 council advisors to the Hokage, Kohoru, Hamura and Danzo, Mabuki Haruno and Fugomen. She's a farmer. Retired ninjas were those that were lucky enough to see old age. Who among those 5 are the most scarred? Name 3. Scars meant that they had been in many dangerous scuffles, especially for a retired ninja. It didn't have to be physical scars. It could also be psychological wounds. Mabuki Haruno, Danzo Shimura and Fugomen. Who among those three have refused to come for a regular checkup? Name 2. This showed stubbornness, meaning that they were unwilling to ask for medical help because they mostly preferred self-medicating, and, which is not safe. Don't do it. Danzo Shimura and Fugomen. Who is the oldest between them? Danzo. How old is he? 73 years old. What rank would you give him based on his strength? Jounin rank. Have you given him an unasked for scan and why? Yes, and because I wanted to know why a man as old as him would be in such good shape. Last question, in your opinion, how desperate is Danzo to stay alive? The woman shook. I can sense different chakra in him, mostly around his arm and his eye, but he has seals there that try to suppress them. I don't know what they are specifically, but with how secretive Danzo is, it isn't good. Good. Now he had a target for one that frequently refused to die. You see? It wasn't so hard now, was it? Tsunade's vision became hazy, and she fell flat onto her face. Gum! Tsunade sputtered awake, her eyes wide in horror and staring at the blackness before her. Her quivering hands patted down her body, surprised to find that there was a blanket covering her body. She reached with her left hand to her side and clicked on her bedside lamp, sighing in relief when the light went on to illuminate her bedroom in her apartment. The door flew open and Shizen stood at the door holding a kunai so tightly her knuckles were white. I thought I heard a noise," the assistant said and stashed her kunai back into the pouch on her lower back. "Is something wrong, Lady Tsunade?" The woman stared at Shizen for a few minutes, just grateful to be alive, before she shook her head with a gentle smile. "No, it's fine. It was just a bad dream. Go back to bed." Meanwhile, back in the graveyard, Naruto smirked a little in triumph. His eyes went to the massive head behind him, as well as the hidden animal path summons. Now I need to find out where Danzo lives so I can take him. He silently mused to himself for a minute before he snapped his fingers. He had 2 spies in Konoha. One of them was especially close to the old geezer. He tapped the back of his hand, making a red dot light up in the very center of the back of his hand. He dragged the red dot towards his pinky, and then tapped his right ear, where a white earbud sat. Naruto closed his eyes and ran through his memory for the name of the spy he wanted. It finally clicked, and he finally spoke to the awaiting receiver. "Patch me over to Sai." Chapter 8. 6:30 p.m. 3 hours before Naruto arrived in Konoha. The Haruno household. The Wealth District, also called the Influential District. Kanahigaku no Sato. Fire Country. "Ah, you must be my little Sakura's teammates." A fairly tall, lithe woman with softly flowing waist-length pink hair and smooth skin said in an unconsciously seductive voice to the children. She was more than used to using that voice and getting what she wanted. Her child eyed her suspiciously, and the mother scratched the back of her head as she came to the realization. Mabuki cleared her throat with a delicate hand placed over her chest, making her white casual short-sleeved shirt and red home dress swish with her movement. It barely reached the ground, just a bit under her knees. "Please come in," she said in a much lighter voice. Despite Sai and Minato Jr. being little more than robots, the 13-year-old boys gulped thickly, prompting the woman to sweat drop and chuckle nervously. Sakura groaned sourly and dragged both of them in by their ears so that they would stop ogling her mother. Though both of them took off their shoes at their female teammates' insistence, placing them beside the door in a row. Sakura knew her mother couldn't help it, making knees weak and groins heavy, but that didn't mean she liked it being done on 2 people she considered her friends. "Can you and your friends help me set up the dinner table?" she called from the door. The woman closed the door shut with a click. "Yes, Mama!" the girl shouted back as she led the charge to the living room once the boys managed to gather their tongues from the ground. Mabuki Haruno was a very beautiful woman, that was an undisputed fact in all of Konoha. With a heart-shaped face, lovely teal-green eyes, a cute button nose and perfect lips that were ever painted a deep, intoxicating red. Her every walk could get a man standing in no time. She had used her looks to take her far in the shinobi ranks, but not as one that would kneel down and blow pipes just for a raise, but rather she became a mistress of illusions. The shimmering pink flower was what they called her. Mabuki was a great jounin, even though ninjutsu wasn't much for her and taijutsu was learned more out of self-defense than anything. Despite her looks, the woman was reputed to never be able to keep down a life partner, with each one either being too timid to object to her or too brash to take her opinions lying down. She never really focused on relationships when she was an active kunoichi, but rather saw most of the men around her as ways to satisfy her ever so ravenous hunger for sex. Minato Namikaze was different though. He was a man that embodied all the positives in the universe, in her eyes, and she saw that he could never do any harm. The pink-haired woman had gotten into many fights with Kushina over who was the better woman for him until the red-head later won. His marriage, though, never stopped the Haruno's shameless advances. Her image of Minato was destroyed when he had summoned her and a few others to her office and informed them that they were all going to be in a fake retrieval mission. Kidnappers had taken his children, Naruto and Naruko, and they were to try their best but ultimately fail. While in truth it was their godfather that had taken them to be trained to be Konoha best tools. His reason for this? The man didn't even bother to hide the venom welling up in his very being. He hated with children with a burning passion. Against popular opinion, Mabuki loved children. She had always wanted a child of her own, but Tsunade had carefully ruled out that prospect when it had been discovered that her womb had been damaged. No explanation came up, but Mabuki had a faint idea what had killed her chances of bearing children, despite always begging her sex partners to dump it in. She didn't want to relive those memories. Because of the hate of the yondaime, she retired from being a kunoichi, against the latter's wishes, and became a civilian councilwoman in charge of traveling merchants that were born in Konoha. The pink-haired woman found Sakura in the orphanage. A tiny little girl of 5 years old with a mop of dirty pink hair and bright green eyes that sparkled with intelligence. The girl looked so much like her that she felt that the heavens had heard her cries for a child and dropped down an angel. Sakura was everything Mabuki ever wanted in a child: smart, but not a prodigy, adorable and stubborn as a rock, but only when it came down to living or dying, and Sakura had that in spades. Sakura was a smart girl, she was not a prodigy, so the proud mother wasn't surprised that her adopted daughter became Kunoichi of the Year, much like her. Though the mother wasn't too happy to hear that her daughter was having trouble making or keeping friends in the academy, she still found the willpower to hope. The woman was in her early 40s, but she was still good friends with her former teammates, so she banked on her Sakura making friends with her teammates. The woman happily swished into the room holding a gleaming pot of ramen in one hand and another pot full of roasted pork meat. She didn't particularly like the food choice her daughter's teammates had asked for, but she was just too happy to hear her child was making friends. The retired kunoichi dropped the pot in the middle of the table and spun around the table, serving the children food as she passed them and leaving the air with the scent of her rose petal shampoo. It was like her every movement was similar if not the same as a professional ballerina dancing. Smooth, fluid and in control. Before they knew it, she spun on her toes and sat down gently onto the seat at the head of the table. Sakura glared at her and coughed heavily. Ahem! Mabuki, who was about to swallow a forkful of ramen, paused and looked at her daughter, who was subtly nodding over her shoulder to the front door. The woman slowly lowered her fork of food. She was going to spend an extra hour in her private gym just to burn it out of her body, and grinned evilly. Sakura's green eyes remained defiant and insistent. Ahem! I'll have you know, Sakura, that I quite enjoy eating food too. The poor girl was now in a coughing fit. Akahem gakahem! The woman pouted. Fine, if you need me. She sniffled and sharply looked away. I'll be organizing my underwear. Anyone want to join me? Mama! Mabuki cackled at how red-faced her daughter became. I was joking. She was about to leave, but stopped when the son of the yondaime spoke. Lady Haruno? Yes, Minato Jr.? Junior is fine. Then please call me Mabuki. Lady Haruno was my mother's name. Sakura groaned and slumped into her chair in embarrassment. Ugh, Mama! The blonde mini-clone of the fourth Hokage nodded. I wish to ask you some questions. But Junior! This is supposed to be a team dinner. No outsiders. Don't mind her, she's just salty she hasn't hit her growth spurt yet. This time the girl didn't groan but rather sat up and lifted her chin stubbornly. She would hit that spurt when she was good and ready, damn it. Sai pursed his lips and looked to his teammate, then he said, Is that so? His empty eyes suddenly became much too amused and his grin was stretched painfully wide. As a matter of fact, I knew something was wrong, but I didn't think her lack of chest would be the cause. He chuckled when the girl faced him with fire in her eyes. Meanwhile her mother giggled into her hands. Junior cleared his throat. Just a few questions. She sat down. Ask away. The boy wasted no time. What happened on the retrieval mission you went on 10 years ago with the Yondaime, Ibiki Marino and Inoichi Yamanaka? Can I have the details? The mission had happened 13 years ago and it was still as S-rank as it ever was, but Junior removed the file from inside his jacket and placed on the table, beside his food. Is it true that you, and I quote, accidentally cast an illusion over Minato that threw off his aim? Her lips tightened and her eyes fought not to harden at how similar the boy looked to his father. He didn't behave like Minato Sr., but he was as critically as his father. Well? The silence that came after was deafening. The retired Jounin's eyes became large like dinner plates, and she unconsciously reared back a little. I'm sorry, I have an errand to run. She stood up and left the room in a flurry of clothes. Junior narrowed his eyes. Was that guilt? Sai and Sakura shared a look as the boy kept his eyes on where the Haruno mother had sat. 2 hours 20 minutes later. The Forest of Death. There was very little that could be hidden from the Rinnegan. The Rinnegan king stopped before the gates in front of the forest. He bent his right knee and leaped over the gate in one quick movement. As he landed inside, he immediately faced his black with red ringed eyes on a tiger twice as large as any normal man. On seeing the eyes of the person that entered the forest, it scampered away, whining like a cat that lost its food. The king scoffed and began walking forward, a single red-haired teen with the most evil eyes the animals had ever seen. It was like his whole body glowed with an ethereal black light, attracting eyes but being too scary to actually be approached. The trees soon became too dense for the faint moonlight to penetrate and light up his path, but Naruto's eyes glowed in the dark, something that made every leaf in a 20-feet radius around his quiver and every tree bow towards him. The world became brighter in his eyes, and the light green specks of light that littered inside the trees, their nature chakra, gave him the light he needed to tread forward. He stopped before a tree with absolutely no green light flowing in it, and he placed his right palm on the trunk before him. There was a long, low hiss as his hand pushed forward. His eyes shone with delight as the whole tree fell apart to reveal a 10-feet-long metal cylinder that looked to be about 4 feet wide, just about as wide as the tree was before it was taken down and used as a cover. The leaves and chunks of bark on the ground shuffled aside by his gravity control, and he kept pushing forward. The hiss continued until a seal flared to life under his palm. There was a spurt of fire under his hand, but he suppressed his delighted laugh. The fire collected over the seal in a translucent, fairly flat bubble of light blue energy under Naruto's palm. The flat bubble steadily increased as the defensive seal kept pumping out more and more fire to scorch the intruder. There was no doubt the base was on fire with alarms, but he didn't really care, until the flat bubble became as large as his palm before he compressed it all into a single spinning ball of death that bore a close resemblance to a jutsu his father created. The king pushed the ball forward and the seal immediately gave out in a glorious shower of yellow and red sparks. A terrible grinding, cracking sound broke through the deathly silence of the forest as the king pushed the contained ball of concentrated fire onto the door of the hideout. A large panel opened up when the locks gave out under the tremendous heat, just about as tall as him, and he kept pushing forward with the fire in his hand until the door exploded outwards, throwing the door down a long flight of stairs into the blackness of nothing. Naruto pulled back his hand and held the orb of gathered fire, held together by the chakra-draining/containing ability of the Preta path of his Rinnegan. His black with red eyes looked down into the stairs before he tossed the ball of molten, super compressed fire into it. The ball lifted up into the air and light up the darkness, like a torch. Naruto looked over his shoulder, and multiple bursts of smoke later stood 5 grotesque-looking centipedes that wound as long as 20 feet with dripping poisonous teeth and Rinnegan eyes. The multiple-legged creatures gathered before the door and wound their bodies around the entrance as Naruto got inside, blocking the exit with their armor-like bodies, though 2 stood before the door to guard it against anyone that found a way to break past. Naruto didn't want any survivors. The Preta-Path's suppressed bubble of fire lit up his path down the stairs. He wavered in place at the top of the stairs, deciding whether or not to simply fly down to meet the hundreds of ninjas awaiting him, with the prideful man, Shimura Danzo, refusing to retreat standing behind them. He ultimately decided not to, not because his eyes couldn't handle using more than 2 paths of the Rinnegan at a time. He could use all the paths if he wanted, but rather he wanted to enjoy this opportunity to erase one of the people he most hated in the world. Shimura Danzo, he could remember very vividly, always visited him and his sister during their time in Sound to supervise their conditioning by Orochimaru. The old man never failed to remind them that it was one of his dreams to one day have them as his tools as well as to become Hokage. If he had to kill Minato to do that, then so be it. Naruto began his steady, careful walk down the long flight of stairs. He and his sister, Naruko, hated the man with a passion because he stood by and supervised their torture and training. They also hated him because Danzo actively discussed his plans to become Hokage, killing Minato if necessary. That was what made both twins hate him even more. They wanted to kill their father. His sensory abilities allowed him to sense the increasing number of people waiting for his arrival. He focused even more and discovered that the network of tunnels was gradually becoming emptier since the people were waiting for him, except those that waited in a large, separate room, possibly as support. Root was an illegal organization that was founded by the old war hawk himself, and Sai was a member of this organization. The king could remember what he told the 2 5-year-olds 7 years ago, a whole 4 months after leaving Sound with the other former slaves. He had just assigned spies to the other main villages and a few other countries. He chose to use children because he planned for them to work their way up the rankings of the village and gain trust from the grassroots, garnering a good reputation and great trust among people. A smaller reason he used children most was because he had a distrust for adults, and this was understandable, though as months went by with his people he excluded the adults of his kingdom, and those that served him on the ground. There were only a few adults among his spies, but they were mostly to work among the civilians. Despite being busy with their functions in other countries, Naruto ensured to call them all back, a handful at a time, to collect their rank under armor depending on their level of skill. The civilians were given bronze forearm, shin and shoulder pads that could blur out of sight, and the ninjas were mostly given silver ranks. Sai and his other spy were both silver ranked, and they always wore their under armor under their regular clothing disguised to look like their skin. Their rank was their pride. Yes, he remembered exactly what he told the 2 loyal children. I want you to be my eyes and ears in Konohagakure. I want you to gain trust among the populace, as much as humanly possible. You will support each other, be friends with each other, but if this gets in the way with your cover, then keep your association a close-kept secret. Your allegiance to me should also be a secret. Are you both now aware of what it means to be my spies? Yes, sir, they replied. If life in their cages as slaves had done anything for them, it was force them to grow up. Among the many that had swarmed around their new leader, hoping to be picked to serve as his spies, Naruto chose them because of their zeal. We will not disappoint you. I trust you will not. If there is any problems, do not hesitate to contact me or the division heads. We will extract you if it gets too perilous. We are very grateful, sir. He escorted them into the village and dropped them in the orphanage. The other spy was the first to be adopted, technically. Sai was among those that Danzo had gathered back to his root base to serve as his operatives. Sai had disappeared from the radar for a few years, but his other spy kept him informed of what had happened. When Sai resurfaced, Naruto was made aware that the boy, then 11 years old, had risen through the root ranks, and was now among the 3 right-hand men for Danzo. Why had Danzo's brainwashing not worked on Sai? The answer was very simple. Both spies were fanatically loyal to Naruto, much like everyone in his kingdom. This had kept their minds on track. The root operative was currently on a secret mission to Hidden Mist to investigate a claim a traveling salesman made that the village was now ultimately in the command of a great kingdom full of powerful warriors and a king that was as revered as a god. It was minutes after his dinner that he had been sent on the mission by Danzo. The king could hear the deep regret in the voice of the younger teen that he was not around to meet him, but Naruto reassured the boy that it was fine. All he needed was where he could find Danzo. The boy went above and beyond by telling Naruto where all 5 entries and exits of the hidden base was, the approximate size and the exact number of ninjas currently in the base. A few Root had gone on a separate mission to Demon Country to steal an ancient artifact, but besides them, and Sai's team on their way to Kiri, the others were still inside the base. The information was more than enough for the Rinnegan King. Naruto stopped 10 steps above the ground floor and mentally shifted his floating orb of fire far behind him. The orb enlarged to form a large bubble that covered the exit, which also sent light down to shine in the dimly lit area and block their exit. Filled with dozens of root ninjas, he looked over the still forms of all the white-masked ninjas and saw an open door, where even more ninjas waited in an even bigger room. The redhead smirked darkly. The black with red ringed Rinnegan pulsed, and all the bodies of the ninjas in the area locked up, standing stock still and in attention. He lifted his right hand up, palm open and facing the ground, and their feet followed suit by lifting off the ground. They didn't even have the bodily control to struggle against his powerful hold. When his hand was shoulder level and suddenly closed his hand into a light fist, and all of the levitating ninjas shot together into the middle of the room, crashing against each other in a floating ball of limbs. Then Naruto clenched his fist tighter, and the push of gravity became too much for any human body. Blood exploded from their bodies and painted the walls and ground red, though never meeting the master of the Rinnegan. The bodies kept being crushed together. Loud cracks echoed through the dim area and shot through the air of the room behind them as bones broke. Naruto's smile twitched up, but only a little, as he increased the power of the air around them. This finally led the ball of bleeding flesh to turn into thick red paste, full of human bones and fairly intact organs. Naruto flicked his hand over his shoulder and sent the ball of blood into the orb of fire behind him, commanding the thick black smoke to blow it up the flight of stairs so that the smell wouldn't irritate him. The Pretapath-controlled ball of fire fizzled and sputtered as the blood finally finished entering it, exiting as nothing more than thick pungent air. He suspected that the animals of the forest would catch the scent and run to the cause. It was what he wanted. The ball of fire kept bubble but never pouring out of the containment sphere, which wasn't controlled by the Deva path, which controlled attractive and repulsive gravitational forces, but rather the Pretapath, which allowed Naruto to suck out as much chakra as he wanted from anywhere or anyone, and also a myriad of other abilities. Naruto began his walk to the other root ninjas. This'll be fun. Needless to say that regardless of the ruthless training regimen of the ninjas, they were very much unprepared to face the might of the Rinnegan King. The chase much more amusing than he thought. After he walked into the room with the next wave of root operatives, with his arms crossed and his Rinnegan eyes shining with hidden humor, the ninjas crashed down on him in waves of black, all in a flurry of metal and limbs to kill the intruder that had infiltrated their base. When they were close to him, about 3 feet away, the world spun to a slow crawl until it moved much slower than a pregnant snail. He could see each and every blank-masked man and woman that rained down on him with the intent to end his life. He counted exactly 65 root operatives. The teen uncrossed his arms but kept his and his shoulders hunched over as his arms disconnected from his shoulders for the briefest of moments. His head lowered and looked to the ground, throwing his shaggy red hair over his eyes and hiding them in deep blackness. Quick as a flash he lifted his eyes and his Rinnegan flashed mightily, so much so that despite the pause in all motion there was a fast thud around his feet, heavily suppressed so that all of Konoha wouldn't feel it but not the whole base. He lifted both of his arms, fists tightly clenched and facing his sides. Then from his fists bright blue, scorching hot lasers fired around him. He moved them as he blasted the lasers about, cutting through each shinobi with ease until he abruptly stopped and brought his arms back to his body, crossing his forearms over his chest and shutting his eyes in concentration. Naruto threw his arms open as he opened his eyes. The world began moving at its normal pace once again as the teen muttered, "Almighty push!" The whole riddle shinobi around them gasped out blood from out of their mouths in the shock they could not hold down. The air around Naruto vibrated violently and surged outwards in a bubble of extra thick air, throwing the root ninjas back and into the walls with enough force to bash their brains and their skulls into mush. A few though blasted out of the room and into the next room, as spacious as the Chunin exam stadium. They collided against their surprised comrades and summarily died from the number of thin holes in their bodies. The Rinnegan King continued his easy stroll forwards, each step sending terrible tremors through the base, though the seals holding the place up and keeping it from being felt in Upper Konoha. The thudding became louder and heavier as he approached the arena until it stopped abruptly with him standing at the door with his hands to his side. He regarded the gathered, tense ninjas that numbered close to 7 dozen and as far as 25 feet away from him. All of them stood in fighting stances, tightly gripping their weapons or their fists. It was silent for a few minutes until, "Kill him!" a voice he suspected was Danzo's reverberated around the whole fighting area. Naruto smirked and ran to them, his head low and his arms flying behind him in a classic ninja run, as they also ran to him as well. As he neared them, he leaped high into the air and landed in the middle of the fray. His fist shot out and caved in the face of a shinobi. He slapped a sword aside, causing the blade to slice open the throat of another ninja and sent a spinning kick to the swordsman that flung the receiver far across the room. The king caught a blow with his right palm and dragged the root closer, tripping him with a smooth sweeping of his legs so he lay sprawled on his face and using his limp body as a shield against the deadly fire jutsu. Naruto threw the dead ninja in his grips away and drove his fist again into the torso of another, making blood blast out of his mouth. The Rinnegan holder broke the left knee of another ninja with a wicked kick and dragged the ninja again to be his shield against a barrage of shuriken. His drove his elbow up the chin of a ninja, grabbed the face of another one that thought his back was open and brought it down to meet the ground in an earth-trembling slam. His palms raced forward and palms struck the chest of 4 root operatives, leaving deep dents above their hearts, and he allowed them to fall as he faced other black ops. As he smoothly flowed under 7 sword stroke that threatened to cleave off his head, his Rinnegan eyes flashed multiple times as they looked around with many quick flicks. This time he wasn't slowing down time in his eyes but rather masterfully making use of his ability to see chakra and his limited ability to predict, or anticipate, an opponent, not unlike the Sharingan. His eyes flipped around without him turning his head to look behind him as well. The incredibly powered Rinnegan in his eyes pulsed 7 times in the span of half a second, flashing over all the remaining ninjas, still about 60 in number. The king clenched his fist and stepped on the foot of a ninja with enough strength to flatten it, throwing the screaming ninja above his head to slam into the ceiling like an arrow. The man's body hung limply like a grotesque chandelier. He grabbed hold of the flak jacket of a ninja that came at him with a kunai wrapped with 3 seal bombs, a mass suicide attempt because the tremendous blast would take out dozens around him in the process. He ripped the blade out of his hand, pulled out 2, shoved them into the ninja's mouth, breaking the mask in the process, cracking his elbow up to shut his mouth up and sending a heart-stopping punch to his heart to fling him away as he threw the kunai in another direction behind him. Bibio! Light flooded the room, and despite the arena being very well lit, it still blinded those that were unprepared for it, and blew apart those in its blast radius from both bombs. He slid away a small step and his foot cracked against the head of a root ninja that attempted to ambush him from beneath him, breaking his neck cleanly, and with another kick he decapitated him and the flying head bashed into the head of another shinobi. He shifted his shoulder aside and dipped his fingers into the shuriken pouch of his last attacker with blurring speed far surpassing the man, grabbing a fist full of standard shuriken, and jamming his fingers into neck of the person he took the shuriken from, severing his neck bone cleanly. He brandished the shuriken in his fingers and peppered them in a small crowd of ninjas. Naruto puffed out a breath and stood up straight again, His Rinnegan looked around and he smirked at the dead bodies surrounding him, bleeding corpses that were twisted in painful positions. More than a few of them were headless or were scorched from the bomb. The king dusted down his red shirt with his metal-armored fingers and continued his steady walk towards a stunned Danzo, who after witnessing one teenager take out a room of about 86 professional, highly trained root ninjas began to seriously question his own chances. The man stumbled away from the eerily calm bearer of the Rinnegan, never really taking a good look, much to Naruto's disappointment. The elder hobbled with his cane into the other room and Naruto followed after at his own leisurely pace. He still had about 10 minutes before the King of Hell would fully heal his sister, and even still the monkey and drill-beaked bird summons were keeping careful guard of them. He could even see through their eyes, which would have been a great disadvantage given that he was very busy at the moment, but he could switch to as many fields of vision he wanted without disrupting his own normal vision. He wanted to bring back his sister so much it was painful, but he also wanted one of the top 5 most hated people in his list to suffer terror before he died. The master of the Rinnegan deftly picked up a tanto that jutted out of the ground with his right hand and twirled it in his fingers, before he flicked it to his right, flinging off the caked-up blood spattered on it. His obsidian boots, connected to the equally black armor under his clothes, splashed through the small puddles of blood and then the black scuff marks caused by one of the bombs. He slashed across 2 ninjas and stepped over their leaking bodies. His new weapon shot forward and sliced through the heart of a ninja. He unsheathed his blade and pushed the dead ninja aside. His left hand came forward and grabbed a ninja by his neck as he fell down from the ceiling. His blade blurred forward into the root ninja's stomach an uncountable number of times as Naruto stared deeply into the dying man's eyes through the eye holes of the other's mask. He discarded the profusely bleeding man over his shoulder and threw the tanto in front of him, slicing through the hearts of 4 ninjas before pinning a 5th ninja into the wall. He walked around the lifeless shinobi to Danzo. The one-eyed elder had finally found his bravery and stood in the very last training ground, his eyes looking down on the far superior eyes of the king. The elder was standing a few short feet away from the wall. Naruto stopped 10 feet away from him and cocked his head to the side. "Do you know who I am?" The man narrowed his eye, then they became slightly wide. "I thought you were dead. I still have a lot to live for." The council elder glared. "Then you made the mistake of coming here, brat." Naruto opened his arms, motioning at the carnage that he had left in his wake. "I assumed that this would be more than enough to quell your pride, but I should not be surprised. You were always an old fool." His black with red-ringed eyes glowed after his last words. Danzo snarled and clenched his walking stick, pointing it at Naruto, and a short blade slid out of the base. "You still do not know what respect means, even after all the conditioning. I knew I should have pressed harder to take you and your sister from that vile snake." He spat, getting angrier at the small smile on Naruto's face. Naruto shook his head in exasperation. "We both hated you, you know, me and my sister. We wanted to hang your guts all over Konoha and dance on your heart. You both were and still are weak." Then a realization hit the old war hawk and he smirked evilly at Naruto. "Oh yes, that filthy sister of yours was killed, was she not?" Suddenly all the amusement left Naruto's godly eyes and the teen slowly cocked his head to the side, staring at the older man with hollow eyes. "I watched the video of that snake slicing her throat. Your screams were simply amusing." He licked his lips and Naruto remained still, though his Rinnegan glowed even brighter and the lights around dimmed a little, though the man did not notice since he was too invested in his story. "The funniest part of that was when she said you shouldn't worry about her." The man chuckled in a deep voice, the sound resonating around the room full of corpses. The king's red-ringed eyes glazed over and his lips twitched downwards. "She was more worried about what would happen to you than herself. Only a naive child would do that dash." He coughed as an invisible hand wrapped around his throat. He hacked and clawed at his neck, dropping his cane as he did so, but struggled even more when he felt no physical hands choking him. Naruto walked to the gasping man, forcing Danzo down onto his knee and his hands forced to support his body from crashing into the ground. "You just called my sister naive." His right foot shot forward and cracked against the chin of the elder, making his head bounce against the wall, and slammed back into the ground. She was the light of my life. His voice became deeper with each word he spoke, shaking the underground bass heavily. This time he kicked the elder's chest, and the man grunted out a choke as he again crashed into the wall, and back onto the ground. She was my soul. He kicked the man's chest again, and Danzo smashed into the wall once again and fell onto his face, almost lifeless. Naruto grabbed the back of the elder's head and lifted him off the ground, his eyes more than angry. Your soul will be the price I paid to get her back. You should be glad your worthless existence would bring back MY. Angel! The holder of the Kyuubi's chakra drove his fist into the man's stomach, never releasing the gravity hold around the older man's neck, and bashed the man's weakened body against the wall hard enough to leave a dent. The limp body of the former head of the now defunct underground organization slowly lifted into the air and followed after Naruto as the teen flew out of the base towards the cemetery. As the air ripped against the cheeks of the teen, Naruto tapped his ear, mentally ordering the centipedes that wrapped around the tree to allow the wild animals of the forest into the base to eat up the bodies of the dead ninjas. Patch me over to Sai. Yes, my lord. A second later, and he heard a low voice reply. Sai here, my lord. He could hear the root ninja fall onto one knee from the dry leaves that crinkled around him. I want you to kill the root operatives with you. Find as many as possible and kill them as well. Make sure you take care of their bodies. I give you 3 days. That would be more than enough, my lord Naruto. I swear on my life to complete this mission. He could hear the spy in Konoha draw a kunai from his pouch with a slick ping. Will there be anything else, my lord? Yes, I want you to remain in Konoha to look after my brother. When the time comes, you and the other spy would meet up with those in the Akatsuki, but for now remain unsuspicious. He shot out of the exit of the organization, a sign for the wild animals to surge in and take control of the newly made feeding ground. His centipedes disappeared in 5 poofs of smoke, though Naruto kept flying with Danzo's body through the trees towards the Konoha graveyard. Your wish is my command, my king. Naruto disconnected. There was a niggling feeling in him that Sai was already taking care of his former comrades. The king skidded to a stop in the grave, tousling the ground and making a few of the tombstones tilt backwards at the force. Naruto didn't spare Danzo with a comfortable landing. The older retired ninja's body soon came after and crashed into a tree. Naruto looked at the crumpled form of the once proud leader of Root. 2 monkeys emerged from their hidden positions around the head of the King of Hell and grabbed the old man by his shoulders. Naruto's eyes narrowed as his Rinnegan saw the chakra network of the man. He nodded, and the monkey gripping Danzo's right shoulder reached over and ripped out the eye hidden under the white bandages, making Danzo's grunt loudly in pain. Naruto nodded again, and the other monkey ripped out the wood release, Hashirama arm clean out of its socket, leaving him with only one arm and heavily bleeding from his missing eye. Naruto frowned as he saw the seal lying in wait to activate after Danzo had died. Orochimaru was the one that gave Danzo the seal. He didn't care. Naruto faced the King of Hell head holding his sister's body and clapped his hand, the sound echoing around the cemetery like a death bell. He flipped through a set of 10 hand seals before ending with Ram. Outer Path, Samsara of Heavenly Life Technique. The same cloud of darkness that covered the head of the King of Hell swirled into sight again, and a single demonic red eye looked down on Naruto as a pure white head with no nose but with small Rinnegan eyes rose up from the ground behind Naruto, who still held the ram hand seal. The great mouth of the head behind Naruto unzipped and opened wide, leaning its head back as if it was cackling to the heavens. The monkey summons dragged the limp body of the councilman to Naruto. Naruto grabbed hold of Danzo's head with his left hand, releasing the hand seal to do so, and titled his head down to look into the eyes of the warhawk. Are you afraid, Danzo? Before he could get a reply, he took off his hand, ripping out the soul of the warhawk with it. Not wanting to waste any more time, Naruto lifted the soul in his hand and threw it into the mouth of Samsara of Heavenly Life. The darkness above the King of Hell hummed in pleasure. Now that hit the spot. Give her to me, Naruto ordered, and the Shinigami laughed. Fine. And he disappeared in a swirl, but only leaving a small ball of light. All the monkeys and the drill-beaked bird bowed as the soul drifted downwards and entered through the top of the King of Hell's head. Naruto allowed the head behind him to return back to the underworld. The king slowly approached the head, his breathing getting more hurried but his legs nervous to keep moving him forward. It was an hour now, and he knew her body was now fully healed. The mouth opened and the brightest, happiest purple eyes sparkled from the darkness in it. Tears slipped out of Naruto's eyes and fell down his cheeks as he saw them, also seeing the familiarity in her eyes as well. She remembered who he was. He stopped where he was and tried to blink out the tears in his eyes. He rubbed at his tears with his wrist and froze when warm hands gently reached up and held his cheeks. He looked up through his hair, trying to hide the wetness in his eyes, into a brightly smiling face. "Why are you crying, bro?" The girl that spoke looked to be about his age, with flawlessly pale white skin and straight long red hair that went down to her lower back, straight bangs over her forehead a bit above her sparkling, bright purple eyes and two big strands of hair curving down longer past her chin as a fawn-like fringe, framing her face delicately. Her facial features were just as he remembered them, albeit a bit more mature, a delicate nose that crinkled every time she was angry or nervous and small lips that could stretch wide into a toothy grin. She wore a neat, armless red dress that flowed down just a bit above her knees, a dress that allowed her smooth skin to show in all its pale glory. Though she had no shoes, it didn't stop her from approaching him like before. Naruto's shoulders hunched and looked to the ground, sniffling. "I'm not crying." There was a tinkling giggle from the person. She knew how stubborn they could be. "Yes, you were." Her voice was smoother and a bit deeper than when they were younger but still familiar to the Rinnegan King. Her body merely ran through the years she was supposed to be if she had been alive, 16 years old. She was exactly the same height as him with the same body type, the only difference being her waist-length straight red hair and her more feminine bodily and facial features. She gasped in surprise when Naruto wrapped his arms around her and hugged her tightly. "I miss you, sis." Naruko smiled softly and hugged her brother back, nuzzling her nose into his neck and inhaling deeply. "I miss you too, bro. So much." The siblings sat down on the ground, prompting the King of Hell to return back to the underworld, and chatted happily with each other for the rest of the night. Naruto still had something to do in Konoha before he had to travel to Hidden Rain, but for now he wanted to catch up with his formerly dead twin sister. That night, a large, true smile spread on Naruto's face, mirrored on Naruko's face, as they talked and talked with their fingers laced together. A heavy grumble interrupted them, and the girl blushed heavily as Naruto snorted at her embarrassment. "I mean, you have been dead for 7 years. She puffed out her cheeks cutely and watched as he removed his right hand from hers and drew out a scroll from a segment storage seal on his obsidian-armored wrist and dropped it onto the ground. He kicked it open lightly and there were multiple bursts of smoke. His smile increased at the wide-eyed look of his sister as she saw the assortment of food sitting neatly on the scroll, ranging from roasted turkey to beef, to salads to a large stack of cinnamon rolls. Never in her life had she seen this much food. "I brought this in case." She looked at him with teary eyes. "Thank you, bro. Don't worry about it." He let go of her hand and she pounced onto the food like a ravenous wolverine. Chapter 9. 8:14 a.m. Sunagekyo no Sato. Naruto's godfather always told Naruto and Naruko of his plans to create a specialized group of ninjas that were to personally serve under him as his enforcers. He called them his Sound Four, though the group was never really created because the Snake Man wanted to take his time to pick out who would be in the group. He chose to use 4 of the slaves he was brainwashing, namely Sakan, Yukon, Kidamaru, Tayuya and Jiribo. At that time Naruto and his sister were 8, and the chosen 4 were 6. The 3 males were fairly easy to mold, but Tayuya was a girl that was known to have a very thick skull and a stubborn attitude that far surpassed anything Orochimaru ever thought to see. She would spit venom and shriek mercilessly if she was being dragged into the conditioning room, never sitting still to listen or watch those that were hypnotizing her. It was remarkable that she had kept up this attitude for 2 years while the boys broke after 6 months. Even with this, the snake man yearned to have the girl loyal to him for the reason that her strong mental resolve would make her a good servant, so to accelerate this he administered what he called the curse mark of heaven on all 4 candidates. Dark brown eyes squinted through binoculars, and the owner of the pair of eyes made sure that she was stock still on her stomach, her whole body hidden under a camel blanket spread at the top of a roof of an apartment complex. Her shaded binoculars were peering off a building in a position that made sure that the sun didn't ping off the glass eyes while still keeping her hidden from sight. Under the camel blanket and the light layer of sand that had blown on her blanket from hours of lying in the same position, was a girl that looked to be about 14 years old, wearing ANBU grade brown and white desert camel pants, a midriff light brown shirt with shiny silver under armor covering her body underneath her clothes, from her fingertips to the very base of her chin to her toes, where she wore heavy-looking silver boots that were in fact very light for the trained ninja, and also connected to her silver rank under armor. Around her nose and her mouth was a long desert camo scarf to block out the sand that wanted to enter her nose, and her blood-red hair fell down her shoulders. But a long, thin bang fell down between her eyes and touched her chin with white bandages tightly wrapped around her forehead. Her hair didn't distract her though, even as she squeezed her binoculars, zooming in on her target. Beside her was one of her weapons of choice, of which she had 2. A 7-foot-long black barrel with a handle and a trigger. It had a long, powerful scope at the top with a grip at the bottom close to the trigger, and 2 stands at the front, a foot away from the nozzle. Stacked at the side of the weapon were 3 cartridges full of 6-inch-long blue and black senbon, and another stack beside that one with gold and red senbon. The second weapon weighed 50 pounds, and that was without adding the powerful scope and the cartridges. It was made up of strong irons and plastic, but the girl had been trained to heft it expertly. She even had a long brown bag to hold the weapon, which was usually slung on her back if she was to move. Her master had it made, inspired from a plan Orochimaru had. He called it a sniper rifle, the only one in existence so far. The silver-ranked spy of the king of Sukai was observing the Sand siblings as they sat in the Kazekage's office and discussed what they had discovered concerning the recently invaded countries. Temari was waving the letter in the air as she yelled. The spy read her lips. "This king of Sukai sounds like a dangerous guy, but he's ordering us to submit to him." Gaara sighed and rubbed his forehead tiredly. They had been in his office for the past 3 hours, yelling about what to do with the new piece of information they got from their ninjas in spring. The Sukai forces were one of the most powerful he had ever heard of. It was providence that the king didn't order for the deaths of everyone there, including his citizens. That would have been a big mess. "Temari, sit down." The girl sat back in her chair in a huff and threw the crumpled letter to Gaara. "Are you saying you are just going to lie down and let this guy walk all over you?" "I did not say I will lie down for anyone, but will you deny you haven't heard from the reports what this man and his army of, and I quote, monsters can do? People tend to exaggerate when their lives are in danger. Kankuro, who had formerly been busy tinkering with one of his puppets, cut his sister off without looking at her. "I was there, you know." Both of his siblings shut up after being reminded of this fact. After their brother had returned from a simple A-rank escort mission to Spring and encountering the Sukai forces, he had never been the same. He had described what happened to him. He had been taking a walk through the market before he had to return home, but then dark figures dropped down from the sky and surrounded him. Before he could bring out his puppet, he felt a vicious punch to the back of his head that knocked him to the ground but not out cold. He heard the soldiers around him say that they recognized him as the brother to the Kazekage and that their lord Naruto would not be pleased if an emissary of the sand was killed. So they picked him up by his arms and forced him to watch as they skillfully took over the village, receiving little to no resistance. Temari and Gaara were concerned. All Kankuro had been doing was fixing and improving his puppet arsenal. The puppeteer then said, "One of the ninjas, he said that he didn't care if he had to soak the ground with blood, as long as it made their king happy he would do it, without hesitation." He slowly looked to his silent brother and sister, his eyes haunted and wide. They laughed. They killed people like they were squashing flies, and they laughed." Gaara coughed. "Kankuro, how about you go and rest at home? We can handle this." Here the puppeteer dropped his tools. Handle this? 2 hours of bickering with the council and 1 hour bickering without the council, and you're handling it? He stood up and put his foot down. No, I will not go home and rest. That monster is coming. I don't have time to rest. His body quivered with suppressed emotion. The eavesdropping spy smirked and mentally praised her king. Damn, sir, you've got this guy pissing in his fucking panties. She giggled under her breath and adjusted her binoculars. 3 hours of spying and she still wasn't tired. She had been through worse as training in the Tsukai Academy, and once she had been buried in scalding hot sand by Orochimaru as an experiment. This was nothing to her. She felt a buzz in her ear and she tapped it twice. Who's this? I'm fucking busy. Well, fucking busy, this is Shinikora. The voice of the king's personal maid spoke back to her in a smooth, almost even amused voice. The foul-mouthed girl beamed as she squinted into her binoculars. Oh hey there, bitch, how's it going? I'm good, oh hey, I'm coming over to visit. The soul of the fox in human form said idly, already anticipating the outburst, but the outburst was more muffled because the spy wanted to keep her presence hidden. What the hell? The girl said hotly, grinding her teeth to hold down her voice. You old as all hell piece of beetle dung, why the fuck are you coming here? She didn't particularly hate Shinikora. She would admit she was salty that the maid was closer to the king than she was, and this was a big sore spot for her. It mostly was that she didn't want the combat maid to throw her off her concentration. The spy could basically feel the pride of the maid as she said the next words. Our master sent me here to assist you. Don't you dare lie to me with his name, she spat. I will never lie with master's name. The fox spat back, infuriated that the girl would even think that. She regained composure and straightened her clothes, the standard uniform for a platinum rank soldier of the Tsukai Kingdom, combat maid's department of the civilian division. The sly fox smirked. You're just jealous master allows me into his confidence. She then gave an exaggerated pant. He lets me into more than his confidence, little girl. Listen here, you old hag. If master wanted me in his bedroom, then all he has to do is ask. He even gave me my rank himself. Do you get me, you nasty ass cum slut? Lord Naruto trusts me. She clenched the binoculars tightly. Now if I see you here, you motherfucking bitch, in heat, then dash. Then what? Shinikora whispered into the red-haired girl's right ear, making the spy throw down her binoculars and whip out a saban from her wrist to hold it to the higher-ranked woman's throat. The fox giggled and swiped the needle from the girl's hand and stabbed it into the roof under them. How did you get in here? The spy whispered, gritting her teeth in rage as she gingerly picked up her binoculars and continued her observation of the Sand siblings. The blanket she had been lying under was a creation from a collaboration between the Fuinjutsu Division and the Espionage and Infiltration Division, where the material was thick but not heavy and filtered cool air or warm air depending on the environment to those under it. It was littered with subtle chakra suppression seals to perfectly hide the presence of those under it from detection and for the most part sensors. The material had 5 layers to it, the middle layer of which held the brunt of the seals and the outer layers to filter in the temperature and make the spy under it more comfortable. Like now it was fairly cool under the blanket instead of being in blistering heat. The blanket was standard issue for every Tsukai spy. Other standard issue equipment was the binoculars, Saban launchers, Saban cases to hold the Saban, quick cooking ration packets, and a few other smaller things. Spies were meant to be long-range experts, and they were trained to be so. The rifle the girl had with her was the only one in existence, and Naruto wanted it to be so because it would give the secretly fragile and insecure girl a feeling of individuality. Naruto knew each and every one of his people and what they needed, and in order for them to better serve him he needed to make them aware that he could also care for them. Now the Shinikora, the platinum rank, had found a way under the blanket. The older redhead lay on her back and propped her hands behind her head, looking at the spy beside her with playful eyes. Magic! That's how. Don't fuck with me, damn hag. I won't, was the sharp response. Fuck you? I thought you said I shouldn't. The maid covered her mouth when a cackle bubbled out. The blanket's silencing seals were not airtight. The red-haired spy, though, was not amused. Just shut it, and don't get in my way. Since Naruto had sent her, then she would have to tolerate Shinikora. But seriously, is there anything to report? The spy was quiet, until the older redhead prodded her cheek. Tayuya. The girl named Tayuya hissed and looked at the maid from the corner of her eyes. They're leaning more on tearing up the letter. Stupid dickheads. The fox nodded in agreement, and relaxed a bit more. Does Lord Naruto want me to put them down as soon as the letter is shredded? He ordered us to wait 6 days, 5 days as of today, before we can take care of them. Didn't Division Head you, of Espionage and Infiltration, tell this to all spies in a general order? I might have zoned out here and there. The fox only tooted at the girl's attitude. I heard you were with Lord Naruto in Lightning and Water Country, she said to make idle conversation as Kankuro was hit on the head with a battle fan by his sister because of how dark and gloomy he was getting. Yes. Master was very commanding, all 3 countries bowed to his might. As they should, Tayuya said. The simple fact was that all of Tsukai Kingdom and its people were loyal without fault to their king. Tayuya was not an exception. When she was defiant to bow to Orochimaru and resisted with all her might to be controlled like a puppet, she worshipped the ground her master, and her hero, walked on. The girl had spent 3 years in the Tsukai Kingdom's academy learning from the best teachers and had chosen to be a spy because she felt that it would best serve her master, seeing as spies were the ones that supplied the kingdom with useful information that further strengthened her new home. It was either that or she applied to be a maid or work in intelligence, but she could do either because, for the former, she was not much for keeping a place orderly. Her apartment in Suna could testify that, and for the latter she was not patient enough to sit through classes of code breaking, encryption, computer science, and mathematics. Besides, spies were seen as a vital part of the kingdom's forces, and even though she was stationed to Suna and made to leave for her post 2 years after graduating from the academy, the years spent preparing for life in the desert as well as partial independence, she didn't regret her decision. I don't think Gaara's imperial defense can be brought down so easily, so you should probably take down Temari and her brother, leave Gaara for me. And what makes you so sure that I can't handle him and his siblings? His defense is automatic, even after losing the 1 tails. The Simban bullets loaded in the cartridges were strong compared to usual Simban, able to cut through half a foot of pure, solid lead and still a few more inches of steel. The standard issue Simban bullet for spies were not to be trifled with. The rifle too was able to shoot at impossible distances only regular long rangers could dream of, but even with these amazing combinations the bullet would still have a tough time penetrating the sand defense. We want this mission done quickly and cleanly. Kill the leaders so that subduing the followers would be easier. That means we don't have any margin for a long drawn-out fight. No space for mistakes or fuck-ups. They had the option of forcing the fight far away from Suna, but for now they chose to do any assassinations on the spot and swiftly. Yeah, I get it, the spy to the king of Tsukai said idly. After that we can go back to the kingdom, right? When it's all said and done, Lord Naruto has already assigned the civilian division to prepare for another celebration after the world has been conquered. Tayuya bit her bottom lip in excitement. With how everything is going, that'll happen for sure. Her fingers twitched on the binoculars, much too happy and jittery to stay in place. Lord Naruto sure knows how to make a plan, huh? The maid wholeheartedly agreed with the younger redhead. He has a plan for every outcome. The people of the kingdom saw their king as nothing less than a genius. They don't stand a chance. Tayuya grinned evilly. What about the Jinchuriki? One of the moles in that S-rank organization, the Akatsuki, told me when he was here that they have 4 beasts, and I heard the 2, 3 and 8 tails are in the kingdom now. King Naruto wants to turn them to his side, but if they remain adamant then it is just a simple matter of sealing them into more willing people. And there were hundreds, if not thousands, of people willing to have the beasts sealed in them, all for the sake of better serving their lord. So the 1, 3, 4, 5 and 6 tails are going to be resealed, but the 2 and 8 tails have a chance to live? The maid nodded. Damn. Shinikora chuckled. I know. Tayuya was about to make another comment but stopped. She scoffed and relaxed her arms, though not removing the field glasses. They signed the fealty agreement scroll. I was hoping to kill them, she sighed in disappointment. What now? We are to stay until the 5 days are up and watch them. If they decide to shred the agreement, then we take them down when the time comes. She shared a knowing look with the younger redhead. But don't worry, you can use your rifle or your flute later if Master sends us to Fire Country or to Earth Country. Both daimyos, Fire and Earth, had torn the letter to shreds, along with the Tsuchikage, Oinoki, and the Hokage, Minato. A notification came up immediately after they did so, and those that worked in the intelligence and interrogation division noted them down, feeding the information to Naruto as the list piled up. At the moment, Hidden Star, Hidden in the Darkness, and Hidden Fang had shredded their letters, but Chill, Marsh, Waterfall, and Hidden Tree villages, along with their respective country daimyos, signed their agreement scroll. Tayuya lovingly rubbed her hands on her gun. I want to use this puppy to blast holes in people, for our king. She finished, and both nodded. Shinikora returned to making bored conversation, and Tayuya went back to watching the Kazekage's office. S-rank library in the Kage's mansion. The Hokage's mansion. Kanahigaku no Sato. Fire Country. You did what? A terrible yell rocked the Kage's mansion. A bored voice answered Jiraiya. I ripped it up. The Toad Sage grabbed his iconic spiky hair in tight fists and pulled it. Why would you do that? I don't make deals with the devil. Minato's bright blue eyes didn't bother to look up from the scroll littered on his desk. He tapped his sealing brush on his chin. That beast needs to be taken down. The Hokage's former teacher groaned and smashed his fist on the Yandame's table, throwing off more than a few pieces of paper and tipping the ink pot across the others. Why didn't you wait for Kakashi's report? Why didn't you wait for me to get back to you? The Namikes glared at the older seal master. Last time I check, I am the Hokage. I make the decisions for this village. Me. Not you, not the council, not even a fucking referendum. Both men stubbornly kept glaring at each other. That is, until Jiraiya sighed and slumped into a chair. You don't understand, kid. Naruto has the Rinnegan, the strongest of the 3 Dijitsu, and the most powerful eyes on the planet. The eyes that can bring about creation or destruction of all life as we know it. The Toad Sage looked to the still glaring Hokage without fear. I trained a kid with the Rinnegan once, and I learned so much about it you won't even begin to understand, but I will try my best to break it down so it can get into your thick skull. He spat, fire broiling in his eyes and his teeth clenching. Minato's jaw tightened. Nagato had perfect control of his massive chakra reserves. He could easily control and master all 5 nature transformations, including the yin and yang release. Do you know how many years it Sarutobi, sensei, to master all 5? He didn't wait for a reply, nor was he going to get one, but the sage was far from caring as he yelled. It took sensei 10 years to truly master it, but Nagato had already mastered all 5 before I met him. And he was only 6 when I met him and the others. The Yandame's lips tightened and his eyes hardened, still glaring hatefully at his teacher, who had disrupted what he had been doing by toppling the ink pot over his work. His Rinnegan was able to make use of 6, maybe 7 miraculous abilities he called paths, and each one was overpowered at best and mid-S rank at worst. His fucking weakest attack was fucking ripping out your soul. The younger Toad Summoner stood up in a flourish and walked away to another section of the library. Jiraiya hurried after him persistently. If you think all that is going to change my mind, dash. Naruto's Rinnegan is much more powerful than Nagato's. Jiraiya yelled as he threw his hands into the air in frustration. This news made the father of the king skid to a halt and scowl over his shoulder. How do you know that? How are you so sure? Jiraiya answered the questions with his own spitefully hurled questions. Did you not watch the video? The reports? What more proof do you need? Naruto can pop heads with an idle thought. He placed a strong hand on Minato's shoulder. Listen to reason, Minato. The blond man shrugged off the white-haired man's hand and turned to him, jabbing his fingers into the older man's chest. That shit stain is not a threat, he's just a pest that refuses to die. He pointed at himself and snarled. I'll be the one to kill him. It looked like Jiraiya was about to explode over his student, but he barely contained himself. And how do you plan on doing that? Naruto can use all 6 paths, has perfect chakra control, control of all 5 nature transformations, a naturally large chakra reserve, and he is pissed as all hell you threw him to that damn snake. Then a memory came to the sage and his shoulders slumped heavily at the mounting grave situation the world had suddenly found itself in. You indirectly killed his sister. Everyone knows how much they loved each other. It was obvious. Jiraiya placed his hands over his eyes and rubbed them, deep regret immediately running over him like a stampede of bulls. The kids never did anything to him. Matter of fact, the little children were nothing but friendly any time they saw him. No one wanted to be their friend, even their supposed babysitters Shursui and Itachi, but the kids still smiled. The whole village stayed away from them, but the twins still always smiled. They were being bullied by the kids and they still smiled. They behaved so much alike that they might as well be the same person. And Jiraiya had every opportunity to bring them closer, but he had allowed his student to throw them to the snake without any thought. The twins never demanded for friends. They had each other, and it was plain as day that that was more than enough. But Naruko had been killed in the most painful way a child should ever have to be put through, and Naruto had been made to watch. The white-haired man held a bookshelf for support, and his eyes closed tightly to hold in the tears. Minato watched for a few seconds before he turned to the shelf on his right and began riffling through the books. If the village had only treated them better, this whole global threat could have been averted. They are the reason the love of my life lost her mind, the yondaime said in a low, solemn voice. They are the reason Junior has to live without a mother. No, the sage muttered as he cast a disgusted look to his student. The one to blame is the person that unsealed the Kyuubi 16 years ago. The hate you have for those sweet children. He tapered to a stop at his own words and his eyes drooped as he continued. The hate you have for that boy and that girl is unfounded, baseless, useless, and disgusting. They did not ask to be born. They did not ask for that man to attack. They never even asked to be given the 9 tails. They were just born into your hate. Now Naruko is dead and Naruto has the Rinnegan. Face it, Minato, he is the child of hate. Minato could hear slow footsteps walk closer to him, but didn't turn back, keeping his eyes on the books with his hand frozen over one about sealing away Dijitsu. The Toad Prophecy, the older ninja simply said. Blood would soak the ground like a monster even the heavens cannot sate. Earth will tremble under the iron boots of the heralds of fate, who faithfully serve the master of every path. One who wields creation and destruction, but will be a god of wrath. The child of hate, sired by demons' blood and light. From the sky all will bow at his sight. It all made sense now. I was always a skeptic when it came to prophecies anyway, Minato said frostily as he pulled out the theoretical book on sealing away Dijitsu. The only reply was a deep sigh. Leave killing him to me. Just take care of sending my message to every country that hasn't signed his damned agreement scroll. The man looked with disappointment at his student. Hi, Lord Hokage. He made to leave but stopped and spoke without turning around. What, of the Akatsuki? They already have 4-tailed beasts, and I suspect they are the ones that took the 2, 3, and 8 tails. Surely we can't ignore that threat. The yondaime too didn't spare a look at his former teacher. At the moment they are far less important than the Tsukai kingdom, and their... He ground his teeth and spat. Their king. After we finish with them, then we can go back to the Akatsuki. Jiraiya nodded slowly, sullenly, and left to his new mission of coercing the other countries to align with Konoha and Fire Country to fight the Tsukai kingdom. I need to find a way to get a Hiraishin seal on him. His head would roll before he knows it. Minato thought as he dropped his books on a different table. He pulled out a fresh sealing scroll, a pot of ink and brush, and began refreshing himself on the more complex aspects of Fuinjutsu. It wasn't that he had forgotten, it was that he wanted his son to die at all costs. There was no room for any mistakes. He had sent a letter to all the countries about meeting together for an alliance to fight the Tsukai kingdom. Now he had to wait for Jiraiya to return with the news. 8 p.m. Konoha's psychiatric institution for the dangerously insane. Konoha Hospital. Fire Country. Naruko adored her older twin, Naruto. Not because they were related, and it was her obligation to, but because she genuinely loved him. If anyone was to look at them, even if they were in opposite sides of the room, then it would be plain as day that they were related. They were identical twins. The same height, an extremely similar body build, same shoe sizes, the same shade of red hair, the same shade of eyes, and this was something most identical twins didn't have, a shared mentality. Though there were slight differences in their behaviors or manners, the twins could more or less be seen as the same entity. Naruto's Rinnegan, and the buff of first absorbing Orochimaru's memory, didn't make him suffer to train his body or mind, and even if he did, it wouldn't make much of a difference on the surface because the Asura path, the path that could augment his body, kept his physique the same as every other average ninja, the only difference being his black with ringed eyes. This was the same with Naruko. Though her shoulders were slimmer, and her hands and feet were slightly smaller, she was more or less the same build as Naruto. Their single-mindedness could not be emphasized enough. They could sit in a dark room and still find a way to have a long, silent conversation. Shurusui, the playful Uchiha, had said that their twinness was too creepy to handle sometimes, and Itachi, the silent Uchiha, said that they essentially behaved like a married couple. Both Uchiha former babysitters strongly believed that the twins were always holding hands but with their souls. Hell, Shurusui once ranted that they were born holding hands. The red-haired twins silently ran down the pristine and squeaky clean corridor of the psychiatric institution, their arms flying behind them and their heads lowered with narrowed eyes and concentration. With how the ninja and samurai arts came easily for Naruto, given that he had an amped-up version of the most powerful Dijutsu, Naruko was able to keep up with her brother fairly well because despite 7 years of being dead, her mind and body still had the memory of her training with their dead godfather. When she was 6, she was able to bench press 300 pounds due to the chemicals being pumped into her. Needless to say, she was capable of keeping up with her brother, but only to an extent. Like her brother, her chakra and her body was very different than those of regular people, grounders. Like her brother, Naruko was a mutant. Though there should not be any misunderstanding, Naruko wasn't nearly as strong as Naruto, but the girl wasn't remotely weak either. They had broken into the psychiatric institution at night because that was when the patients were herded back into their rooms and security would be focused mainly on the entrances and exits, but the inside was left alone for the most part, only to be patrolled every once in a while. The doors were all muffled, but that was only because the patients were either strapped down to their beds, in straitjackets, or wore mouth guards to prevent them from biting their own tongues or biting others. In Naruto's opinion, the psychiatric institution back home was much better manned and even more humane. It was like Konoha had given up on restoring sanity to those that have lost it. He felt a pair of warm eyes on him and he turned to her, his black with red ringed eyes glowing back to her as he sent her a brief thumb up. The institution had 3 floors with a flight of stairs going upwards and a zigzag connecting all the floors. Currently the siblings were speeding through the 2nd floor upwards. They had gained entry simply by throwing an illusion over them to look like workers. Naruko hissed slowly and skidded to a stop behind a corner leading to a separate wing of the hospital reserved for special patients. Her brother stopped as well and hid across from her behind an open white janitor's room door. He looked to her, and she flashed one finger at him, pointing it down to the ground and then over her shoulder. Naruto nodded, understanding that there was only one person approaching and that they should just take him out without necessarily killing him. Root was exterminated, Danzo was dead, and Tsunade was much easier to handle than he thought. Jiraiya wouldn't be any different, but he still wanted Konoha to put up a fight that would at least entertain him and his sister. Naruko didn't really mind. She was more used to listening and doing what he said, with just a few excepts when they non-verbally formed plans. Get them! Hurried panting could be heard in the forest behind the academy. 4 tiny feet quickly pattered over the dry leaves, making their pursuers track them by the sound. The 2 prey being tracked ducked behind a tree, forced to separate their joined hands so that they could hide behind different tree, 3 feet apart. Two bright purple eyes, large as dinner places and frantic like cornered wild animals, found themselves and they gulped. The male swallowed and tried to steal his gaze, his eyes mirrored off the female, his twin sister, and she added her own courage to the one he was trying to build. Their almost spiritual connection added this together, and the twins were now staring steely-eyed at each other. Naruto nodded and the girl closed her eyes lightly, before she opened them again and flashed 5 of her left fingers, closed her hand and flashed 2 more. 7 bullies. Naruto tapped his right fist on his left elbow twice and the girl tapped her knees. The boy replied with a clenched fist tapping his neck, his chin and then his groin. The girl wavered in place and Naruto sent the message again of what his side of the attack would look like. The girl eventually caved in. She didn't really like attacking bathing suit areas, but Naruto didn't really care about kicking groins. Naruko rolled her shoulders and clicked her heels. A pair of bright red, Sharingan eyes hidden above them furrowed and tried to decipher the quick succession of messages between the twins, but dropped it in favor of watching the agreed-upon plan unfold. Itachi and Shursui were exposed to the secret language only both siblings knew, and even as they compared it to standard sign language they still couldn't find much of a meaning behind the signals and motions. Naruto and Naruko counted down with their fingers. 3, 2, 1. Naruto's right elbow jutted out abruptly and crashed into the first bully's belly. He repeated it with his other elbow behind the boy's head to knock him out. The 3-year-old's movements were clumsy and very sloppy, but the Uchiha Jounin could not deny how effective it was in taking out the 5-year-old boy. As Naruto slid back to his feet, Naruko thrust her fist into another bully's neck, scurried away from a blow, and punched the other aggressor's chin. The leaves almost made the 3-year-old girl trip, but before she landed onto the ground her foot rose up quickly and cracked against the groin of a 4th bully. All 4 were down for the count, either writhing in pain or out cold. The twins' fists weren't even fully developed yet, so a punch should be pretty tame, but somehow they had connected with sensitive parts of the children's bodies. Naruto helped up his sister but was shoved back down by the 5th and 6th bully, while the 7th ran back to the academy to report it to the teachers that the twins were looking for trouble. None of the children were academy age yet, but that didn't mean they couldn't hang out there when school was out. The red-haired twins tried to support each other back to their feet but were viciously kicked in their sides. Naruko's head bounced against a tree trunk and Naruto struggled back to his feet with grit teeth to catch his sister before she hit the ground. He caught the girl in his arms and rolled with her, using his body to protect her, even when his back hit a strong root. His arms didn't move when the bullies cackled and approached them. The red-haired girl beneath him closed her eyes and her fists tightly held his shirt, trying to roll them over so she would be the one to take the attack, but a strong look from her brother, and her arms weakened. The blows hit the boy's back and he stubbornly refused to let them reach his sister. Finally, before the 5th and 6th bully could rain more blows onto the younger children, the Uchiha dropped down and took the twins away. People might have seen the twins as angels, but their children saw their red hair and their deep connection as an oddity, and oddities, as far as child logic went, were bad. The corridor was narrow enough for 3 average-sized men to walk through shoulder to shoulder, but only if their shoulders scraped the wall. Naruto pointed a single finger to his left foot and to his upper back with his thumb, and Naruko nodded, pointing to her groin and her neck. Quick, nasty smirks mirrored on the twins' faces as their plan had already been created, and both of them counted down in silence with their fingers. 3, 2, 1. Naruto jammed his foot down on the Chunin guard and Naruko bashed her fist into the poor man's groin. This made the ninja bend forward to grasp his aching manhood, and that was when Naruto delivered a mind-numbing chop to the Chunin's upper back, just under his neck, and to finish it all off Naruko lifted her right knee and connected it against the gasping older ninja's throat, knocking him backwards onto his back and spread eagle. The two grinned deviously and shared a strong fist bump. "Wicked," the girl said to her brother. Naruko threw her arm over Naruto's shoulder and whispered to her brother. 7 years apart and dash. We've still got it. Naruto finished as he too placed his arm over her shoulder. His Rinnegan told him that there were no more guards, and as they stepped over the Chunin, his gravity control shifted the man into the janitor's closet. "Why did you want us to be subtle again?" Just us two can burn this village to the ground," his sister said as she pulled away, but only to hold his hand and peer into the small windows high up on the doors, briefly looking at each mental patient. She skipped gleefully, and swung their hands between them while Naruto chose to walk normally, and use his Rinnegan to track the chakra network of the person he wanted to go to. Despite still being a 9-year-old in the body of a 16-year-old girl trying to grow up quickly for her brother, she still had her quirks. Naruto pursed his lips and nodded. "Believe me, sis, I know. No one stands a chance against us, not even father." He looked to his sister, and the happiness that had been filling his formerly empty soul gushed out through his godly eyes as he smiled sincerely. "But remember all the plans we made back when we were staying with Godfather? Force the world onto their knees and take Konoha last." The girl pouted but didn't falter in her skipping. I know, but I'm getting impatient, bro. Father is just a few 100 feet away right now. We can leave Konoha for now, but let's just cut off his head." Puyo was. Her eyes enlarged and Naruto pulled her cheek with his free hand. "Trust me on this, sis. If we let him cook in his hate and madness, then ending his life would be all the more enjoyable." She sulked, and the male patted her head. "We can still go for ice cream." She looked at him from under her straight bangs. Naruto's smile twitched up and she sighed in defeat. "Fine." He stopped walking and she stopped skipping as they reached the very last door of the corridor of the second floor. Naruto and Naruko swallowed thickly and the boy raised his left hand and placed it flat on the door. A seal matrix lit up with blue chakra and his sister watched, intrigued, as the seals moved at Naruto's mental command, shifting aside and breaking apart until the door was devoid of any seal and no alarm had been set off. The girl did not know any seals, or jutsu for that matter, so watching her brother display the fruits of making full use of the Rinnegan's ability to master ninja and samurai techniques mystified her. There was a click and Naruto eased the door open. Chapter 10. Day 2. 5 days left. This time it was Naruko's turn to cover her brother protectively. The tears on her cheeks had dried up but still left a visible track down her dust and grime-covered face. The girl had her arms wrapped around her older twin's form as he lay on her abdomen, shivering like a leaf in a storm, and his skin a motley gray color with splashes of green under his eyes and on his fingernails. The boy was curled up in himself, his eyes painfully wrenched shut and shaking like he was in the middle of a terrible blizzard. The female twin sobbed and hugged her brother closer but didn't get any movement in reply. Like she was trying to warm up a vibrating statue. Today had just been Naruto's turn. Their godfather had drawn a nature funneling seal in the middle of his back, a seal that had nature chakra in the nearest vicinity pass through him, wreak their havoc because he wasn't a sage and leave at his fingertips and toes, which was why they were green. The effect of this was the color leaving the 6-year-old boy's skin, turning it an unhealthy, sickening shade of gray due to the dangerous natural chakra taking more than they could ever give him. Orochimaru had placed him in a coffin 6 feet in the ground in the middle of a lush meadow in grass country, a haven for natural chakra if there ever was one. The worst part was that however violently the natural chakra ripped apart his chakra system and his nervous system, the Kyuubi chakra in him found a way to fix it, though always depleting the infinitesimally small resources in the little boy's body. The sadistic snake man had said that the natural chakra would rip apart their nerve endings and condition Naruto to never feel pain again. He still had 3 more weeks of the same torture scheduled, and their godfather looked forward to each and every day. For now the seal had been removed but would be re-administered by sunrise. Naruko sniffed and rocked back and forth, her dirty brown dress rustling and the chains connected to suppression collars around their necks clinked and clanked against themselves. The slave area was deathly silent as those near their caves watched the little girl with mournful eyes try to rock her shaking brother to sleep. The little red-haired girl swallowed and tried humming a song she could barely remember, something from a memory she didn't remember ever happening, but it came out broken and tearful. Naruko stopped trying and merely tightened her hold on her brother as a sound ninja passed by, baring her teeth at the wide smile he sent her before he left. Naruto's shaking didn't lessen. He coughed weakly and his feet forced his body to shuffle closer to the tiny speck of warmth, about the same size as him, but his immobile arms could not move to wrap around the source to comfort her. Naruko felt this, and a fresh wave of tears began falling down her large, bright purple eyes. "Sis, are you there?" He couldn't feel much under his body but the familiar warmth that wrapped around to caress his dying body. His nervous system was pretty much dead, but the Kyuubi chakra was fixing it all up again. The female twin bobbed her hair and gently rubbed her brother's back. "I'm here, bro." The male redhead heaved in a deep breath, trying and failing to fight the terrible shaking of his body. Do you think Mother will love us?" It was a great mystery the twins had been hoping to crack one day. Their father hated the very air they breathed, but they never once knew the presence of a mother or their mother. Minato never once mentioned her without saying that they were the reason she was where she was. They didn't know Kushina had lost her mind after losing the Kyuubi, but they were still children. How could they know that when it was never said to them? They still hoped and hoped and hoped that they would have at least one person in the world that would love them. During their time in Konoha, the siblings never went out of their way to make friends because the people gave them a wide berth. Love was a foreign term for them that they only knew for each other. Naruko ran her fingers through her brother's dirt-speckled hair. "I love you, bro." Her lips twitched up when Naruto's body heaved a little despite the trembling, and a tight, light giggle tinkered out of his lips before it stopped with a tired cough. "I know, sis, but, mother!" His green fingers flexed and grabbed the clothes around her knees, clenching and unclenching like they were spasming. What of mother?" The red-haired girl didn't want to disappoint her brother by telling him that she didn't know. There were days that the truth needed to be said even if it would possibly drop them from their high, but at the moment the only thing Naruko knew was giving her brother as much love as possible. That meant telling him what he wanted to hear. "Yes, bro, mother will love us." Naruto smiled into his knees, still grasping her clothes for dear life. His eyelids became heavy as her gentle fingers traveled through his hair. "Thanks, sis." "Don't forget, bro." Naruko started as she shuffled to the ground, wrapping her thin arms around his form and pulling his head to her chest as she placed her chin on his head. "I love you, Naruto. More than the stars in the night sky or the sands in the desert." Naruto's shivering lessened fractionally, and his fingers grabbed the cloth around her belly in tight fingers. His eyes clenched shut as tears filled them. "I love you too, Naruko." Naruko swallowed thickly when she felt a comforting hand take hold of her left hand, snapping her out from the tormenting memory. Her shoulders shook as she inhaled deeply. Naruto looked at her with concern, but she looked back at him and smiled gently, making a smile come to his face as well. The twins turned back to the person before them. It was a woman with red hair as long as Naruko's, down to her lower back, and a smaller, less healthy frame than when she was at her prime. Her arms were tightly wrapped around her torso by a white, seal-reinforced straitjacket and baggy black pants. Like Naruko, the woman didn't have any shoes on. The twins were 5'5" tall, but the woman, with her sickly pale skin, her frantic bloodshot eyes and her hunched-over shoulders, like she was having a secret discussion with herself, looked to be about 5'8" at best. The woman was sitting on her bottom at the far right corner of the room, rocking back and forth and humming a scratchy tune, hissing with frustration when she fumbled it up but still managing to continue. The female redhead twin pursed her lips tightly, but the tension in her body released when Naruto's hold became firmer, reminding him that he was still with her and that he was also going through the same tornado of conflicted emotions on what they were seeing. The song the crazy woman was humming, muttering patches of the song that mostly didn't make any sense, was the same one Naruko tried to hum back when Naruto was possibly at his lowest, just to bring his spirits up. They never knew their mother, but one of their father's students, Kakashi Hatake, had said that his sensei, Minato, once told him that when he and Jiraiya came back to the hospital to retrieve the twins, to seal the Kyuubi, they had found the woman huddled in the corner of the hospital room, surrounded by the bloody corpses of her guards and the maternity nurses. She was tightly cuddling the silent twins she had given birth to, her eyes wide and obviously crazed, gritting her teeth in physical effort not to bite down on her own children and kill them in a bloody frenzy. She had been trying to sing the same song to the wide-eyed, curious babies, through grit teeth. Her arms twitched and her body rocked heavily, but the woman refused to allow the insanity tearing through her mind to make her kill her children. "Mommy loves you, my sweet babies, Mommy loves you, my perfect darlings, Mommy loves you, my shining stars, my loves you because Mommy loves you," Kushina whispered with tightly clenched jaws, rocking back and forth. Every once in a while she rocked too hard and her forehead hit the soft, padded white wall. She clenched her red from lack of sleep eyes and hummed a song in a broken tune, coughing and spitting when it became too jagged to continue and started all over again. "Mommy loves you, my sweet babies, Mommy, babies," she cursed and tried again. The bandages around her toes were long since disregarded. She had been humming that song for 16 years. It wasn't an easy sight for either of the twins. They did not shed any tears. They didn't know their mother, so even though they had more or less confirmed that Kushina had loved them, or still loved them, they still didn't know the woman enough to mourn for the loss of love. The red-haired twins knew what would have happened if they somehow found out that Kushina did not love them. A look between them confirmed the end result in their shared minds. They would kill her. It wasn't much of a confirmation, but for now, until they found a way to restore their mother's sanity, it would have to do. The girl twin saw her brother nod as he too looked at their insane mother, and she replied with her own nod as she lifted her right hand and pointed 4 fingers at Kushina. Her thumb was pressed on her palm. The muscles on her raised hand tightened and her fingernails glowed light green, creating a small but very noticeable burst of chakra before they shot out of her fingers, jamming into the distracted former Kunoichi's neck. The woman slumped forward as the alarms went off, the sensory seals around the room feeling the burst of chakra. "Blue is a hallucinogenic dart, green is a heavy tranquilizer. It's not lethal," the girl intoned lowly, watching her mother's limp form. "Orange and red are the lethal ones." Naruto nodded, noting the mutant ability she had shown. Similar to how Nirvana Kurigoku, head of the Inventions Division, could take on some of the physical appearances of a rainbow Komodo dragon of Spring Country, Naruko could take on some of the physical attributes of a fox. The ears would sprout from her head, her nails would elongate, and her eyes would change from human to vulpine. While her brother could grow tails, from 1 to all 9, and the pigmentation around his eyes would change to orange, if he channeled his mutant abilities, which originated from his mutated QB and normal chakra. There would be no adverse change in their skeletal systems besides the strengthening of their bones than it usually was. The twins could sense multiple chakra signatures closing in on their mother's room, and they separated hands. Naruko walked up to their mother, and hesitantly hefted her onto her shoulders while Naruto pulled out a 2-foot-long piece of deep red cloth from his pants pocket. He unrolled it, showing that the cloth had the kanji for sky written in gold on it. He placed the small flag of the Tsukai Kingdom at the very center of the room and closed the door as the first ninja rounded the corner, and began racing down to them. The Rinnegan King leveled his right arm to the Super Seal-supported wall opposite the door that led outside the facility. "Almighty push!" The words were low and intimidating as his Rinnegan pulsed afterwards. Crack! Boom! The entire wall of the Yandame's wife's room exploded outwards and the female twin chuckled, impressed at the feat. Naruto couldn't hold back from buffing his fingernails on his shirt. There was a terrible shriek from outside the room and a loud whooshing sound as the drill-beaked bird swooped down from the sky and flapped in place outside the room. The creature had been flying in circles in the sky for the past few minutes, as per Naruto's command, and now it was going to make itself useful. The red-haired girl leaped onto the bird and Naruto hopped on as well. The Rinnegan of the teen could see very well through the animals, but he could not control it, though he still had ultimate command over all the animal summons, so being able to control the animal like a device was almost pointless, seeing as Naruto could just as well mentally or verbally command them. The door of the room they had just jumped out began banging as strong shoulders began ramming into it when the keys failed to work. "Hold on," he said, and Naruko bent her knees, gently placing their tranquilized mother on the back of the bird. She hurriedly plopped down beside Kushina and held the limp woman firmly with her hands. When Naruto was sure she was secure, he said to the bird, "Hokage Mountain! Scree!" The bird called and its mighty wings flapped twice before it zipped to the monument. Black with red ringed eyes turned to bright purple eyes, and their excitement shone between them when they sensed a large amount of wind chakra flash from the Hokage's mansion to the mental facility. Their father. Their bodies tingled. They wanted to fly back and kill him so much. But they stayed strong. If they swept aside the other nations, then Konoha would be stewing in their paranoia. Naruko though quirked an eyebrow. Why the Hokage mountain? The quick bird touched down on the head of the Nidaime Hokage, cantering forward in 4 steps before it stopped, its wings flapping greatly to slow it down from its speedy flight. The girl watched as Naruto flew down gently, and she waved her hand. He helped her down by lifting her up and dropping her beside him. Their mother followed suit. I want mother to be taken back home. Naruko nodded, knowing that home meant the Tsukai kingdom, but her eyebrows furrowed. How? Didn't you say that home was all the way south of Kumo? Naruto tried to suppress the smile as he didn't answer her. Instead he tapped his right ear. The earbud clicked and he said, Patch me over to Division Head Nora of Scout and Retrieval. Patching you over, my lord. His twin sister pouted when he ignored her. Bro? He smiled a little and spoke when he got a reply. Send over a stealth retrieval vehicle to my location. A stealth vehicle was a sleeker variation of the retrieval vehicle used normally, but instead of being used to carry and safeguard transport of dozens of soldiers, it could take about 30 at a time and traveled in near silence, with little to no hope of ever seeing it, especially at night. The king of the kingdom had ordered for the vehicle to readily have 3 medical division personnel and 4 of their best retrieval guard soldiers in each vehicle. Right away, my king! Nora, the black-masked woman that headed the division of scouts and retrievers, said with a deep bow. She had still been in her office sifting through names of people, from the ages of 1 to 6, that could potentially be the new Jinchuriki of the 3-tailed turtle. She had been working with the head of Fuinjutsu, Magi Harai Gamatomo, and the head of intelligence and interrogation, Hamato Toshi. The retrieval division of the kingdom had acquired the tailed beast, at Naruto's command, during their invasion of Water Country. It was during the time the daimyo was being subdued. The loyal till death woman leaped over her desk and shouted for a SV, stealth vehicle, to be ready away from the earbud. I will be with you in 4 minutes, sir. Take your time, the king said, and cut the connection as the woman jogged out of her office and into the large storage room, just outside her office, to clarify, filled with about 100 retrieval vehicles of all kinds, from the regular Tsukai soldier retrieval vehicle to the ones used to retrieve grounders, like Hyujuto and Kurabi. She spoke into her earbud for Stealth Vehicle 1 to begin preparations for takeoff as she leaped into the driver's seat. The personnel rushed in and the roof of the Scout and Retrieval Division headquarters opened up, allowing the vehicle to levitate up with powerful and heavily muffled engines, and with a flash of blue fire it shot into the night sky. Nora pressed 3 buttons on her dashboard and the vehicle shimmered, camouflaging itself into the starry night sky. Naruto, though, was smiling at his pouting sister. When I said that our home is the most advanced places on the planet, I was not joking. And she'll be here in 4 minutes. How is that possible, bro? Kumo is miles away from here. Through the power of dedication, breakthrough engineering and seals, he said as he bopped her nose. Now we have to worry about the Konoha ninjas coming before the vehicle gets here. Not forgetting that he could simply just fly and feed his mother into the stealth vehicle. It didn't necessarily need to land, but what fun would it be to pass up a chance at killing a few of them? They have Nikin trying to sniff us out, the Rinnegan holder said as he saw through the eyes of a wall gecko that was lying on the wall just under the broken wall. The tiny creature had the same eyes as him. He had summoned it to keep a careful eye on the ninjas before he and his sister flew off with the bird. The girl suspected so. She didn't know much of the legendary eyes, but her connection with her brother eased her in on what it could do little by little, like raise the dead, apparently. I still think we should blow this village sky high. Patience, sis. The bird squawked in agreement by his mental command. How about you go and kill those that come while we're waiting? Would that make you feel better? He pinched her cheeks and she rolled her eyes before swiping his hands away. For now. She steadily jogged towards the incoming Konoha ninjas, her features slowly changing as she began channeling her mutant abilities. Don't forget, we have 2 minutes before the vehicle arrives, he called after her. More than enough time. The ears at the side of her head pulled in, and on the top 2 red fox ears came out. Her long red hair covered her missing human ears. Her fingernails elongated till they were about 4 inches long, and the nails on her bare feet too out till they were 4 inches long. She might not have known too many jutsus, because her training/torture had focused primarily on physical strength, flexibility, agility, and some work on her intelligence, but she was still more than enough to handle the approaching jounin. 8. Her senses counted, with only 2 niken that began barking wildly as they caught the scent of fox permeating through the air, a smell that only those with a keen sense of smell could catch. Her long nails changed to silver, and she rubbed them against each other, making white and red sparks to fly off it as she surged towards them. Adamantium bones, that was what her godfather had called it. He said that he had taken the DNA from a dead bone pulse user and altered it with the magnetic release of Sunagakure, so she was able to sprout more metal claws from other places. Though the girl preferred the traditional, savage animal claws to having them come out of her fists or her knees and elbows. Her head lowered and her speed increased. Her metal bones didn't slow her down, and when the first ninja caught sight of her it was too late. She pounced forward and her right foot used his mouth, open in a shocked gasp at immediately assuming it was Kushina Uzumaki, as a stepping stone to dive onto those coming behind him. Her metal toenails broke out of the back of his neck and killed him as she gingerly removed her foot before he could fall and spun in the air to the others. Her nails raked down a ninja's face as she dropped down, and she back-flipped under a niken, grabbing its tail before it could zip away and using the poor dog as a bat to smash into the face of its handler. She ended the creature's life by slamming it into the ground and finished off the Inuzuka partner by slicing all 5 fingers under his chin, elongating her nails to puncture the brain. She didn't stop moving for 1 second as she gave a brutal right hook to an approaching woman and punched her fist into the stomach of another ninja. She ripped his smaller intestine in a shower of blood and roped the organ around the neck of shinobi that had attempted to tackle her, yanking the intestine down to crack her knee on his face, shattering it. Naruko wrapped the bloody intestine in her hands and swung it at the last ninja, using the dead body hanging limply in it as a club. The ninja was slammed into 3 trees before he finally stopped in a ditch. The girl dropped the organ onto the ground and puffed out hair to push away a bang that touched her lips. She turned to Naruto and smirked proudly at the mildly awestruck nod as she jogged to him, her features smoothing out till they returned back to human. If I didn't know any better I wouldn't suspect she was dead just yesterday. He raised his right palm and she slapped it deftly in a high 5. 7 years with the Shinigami, and she still knows how to fight. He watched her slump against the drill-beaked bird and pant for air. That was amazing. Oh stop, you're making me blush, she said with a wave of her hand. Their godfather had been conditioning them to better serve Konoha, and this had to do with body-crippling exercises, chemicals being injected, and traumatizing fights with sound ninja and training. The Naruto's Rinari birth technique could be said to be a perfect, flawless version of the impure world resurrection technique. Instead of being at less than half her strength after being brought back, an effect of the non-Rinnegan jutsu, Naruko was able to reclaim all of her training memories, both muscle and mental. The only minor problem was that she was still a 9-year-old in a 16-year-old's body, seeing as she had been killed when she was 9 and revived at 16. Though this wasn't too much of a problem with the twins' upbringing, because any child that stayed a month in the slave pens of Hidden Sound and survived was not a child anymore. They had to grow up fast or die even faster. It was similar to the red light district in Konoha, except the violence was not mutual. Naruto looked up when he heard a low whistle and a dark mass dropped down lightly before him. The driver hopped out of the window, giving the wheel to the retrieval captain for the stealth vehicle. Nora, the masked head of division, fell onto her knees before Naruto and placed her right hand over her heart. "Division Head Nora of Scout and Retrieval reporting, my lord Naruto," she said in a low, polite voice, her head tilted down and her whole body in the respectfully submissive posture all Tsukai soldiers were trained to do before their ultimate master, Naruto. "Help me transport my mother and my sister back home, please," he said, and nodded to Kushina, still lying on the ground, and Naruko, who shot to her feet and exclaimed, "Wait, what?" Nora too abruptly looked up and gaped at the red-haired girl that stomped over to her king. She looked exactly like her master, except a few small features that made her look more feminine, but looking at the girl confirmed that she was truly one with her master, and he was with her. "Is this Lady Naruko, my king's sister?" Nora said in a quivering voice, barely holding herself back from standing to her feet and kneeling before the girl. "Yes, Nora, this is my sister Naruko. Naruko, this is Nora, division head of Scout and Retrieval." His sister nodded politely to the older woman but gasped when Nora shuffled closer and bowed deeply, placing her forehead on the ground. "It is an honor to meet the sister of my lord. I am humbled. And no, it's fine. Please stand up." The sheer politeness and utter devotion expressed in those few words threw the girl off her enraged yell at her brother. The medics were placing Kushina in a stretcher, strapping her down, when Naruto idly called that she was not in the best health and making sure that there was a constant drip of mild sedatives in case the woman woke up. His sister whirled him around and jabbed her finger into his armored chest. "And where will you be going?" "Hidden Rain, I have a few things to do there." She crossed her arms stubbornly. "I'm going too." Her purple eyes flitted over his shoulder when the medics hefted the stretcher onto its wheels and began carefully shuffling their mother over the uneven rocky ground on the top of the monument. This was their king's mother, they had to be extra gentle. Naruto palmed his face and sighed deeply. "Sis, I know we still have a whole lot of catching up to do, but this mission is very, very important. I want to clear it up quick and get back home." She narrowed her eyes and a large drop of sweat grew on the side of Naruto's face after he revised his words. "Are you saying I'm a burden?" She balled her fists, and her shoulders tensed. "Come on, sis, you know you're not a burden." From what he saw, she could very well hold her own, even if they were Chunin trackers. Speaking of trackers, the village was alight. Alarms blared from the psychiatric ward and he could sense pandemonium occur as people spread out to find the missing patient. "Then it's settled, I'm coming with you." She then glared at him. "And if you dare try to knock me out." She left her warning hanging in the air, but Naruto scoffed and nodded. She pumped her fist to her side in accomplishment. "Is there any spare armor in the vehicle?" the king asked the still kneeling woman. Nora, despite being told to rise, remained on her knees because she was in the presence of the two redheads that had impacted the lives of her and thousands of others, whether directly or indirectly. The woman trembled at the question. "And my sincerest apologizes, my lord, I did not know dash." "It's fine. I should have known she would want to tag along." His sister winked when he shot a mild glare at her. "If you wish, my king, I shall take off my own armor and give it to my lady Naruko," she said without hesitation. Naruto shook his head with a small frown. "Your armor is your rank, you should wear it with pride," he said firmly. She deserved to have the platinum rank, the only rank directly under the obsidian rank of the king. The woman had scratched and clawed her way up the ranks, and Naruto did not like the idea of a person relinquishing his or her rank, even for the briefest of moments. "You are right as always, my lord. If you don't mind, is there any underwear or shoes in there?" She looked at Naruto frostily, and he sent a wink back. "My brother didn't seem to give me any." Besides, her clothes were a bloody mess, as were her hands too. "I thought you would have appreciated the privacy." "Privacy? Between you and me? What's that?" "Really, I do not know what privacy between us means," she replied teasingly with an elbow jab to his arm and playfully waggling her eyebrows. After a few short seconds, Naruto pursed his lips and nodded in agreement. They didn't know what privacy meant between them. They shared practically everything when they were in Konoha and even when they were out of Konoha. Why was it going to change now or any time soon? "Yes, my lady, we have spare clothing and equipment in the stealth vehicle." "Perfect. Go and bring her the clothes." Naruto started, but his words slowed down till he stopped. His senses flared and his godly Rinnegan glowed. The world slowly ground to a stop around his eyes, and the still regularly moving teen narrowed his eyes and looked around. Nora and Naruko were frozen, looking at him as he spoke, as his eyes saw and processed much faster than any normal human ever could. His head turned to where he sensed the danger and walked over to the retrieval vehicle, having to enter the massive open back door to get to his mother's stretcher, which was strapped down securely in the vehicle so that it wouldn't move around when the vehicle was flying. The medics and retrievers were sitting at the seats, making idle chatter, but at the moment they were not moving as Naruto walked faster than any normal human could comprehend. He stopped beside her and frowned at the seal glowing on her forehead. The Flying Thunder God seal. He could see the seal slowly brighten up despite how fast his eyes could see, testament to the sheer speed of the legendary S-rank seal. Naruto pulled out a palm-sized scroll from his wrist in a small burst of smoke, and he placed it over the seal on Kushina's forehead. There was a seal on the back of the paper written in gold with another separate kanji beneath it in red and the last one at the bottom written in black. It was called the Fuinjutsu Absorption Seal. It was primarily meant to be used to transfer the contents of one storage seal, copy the same seal onto the paper and transfer it there, but it could also double up as copying seals. The paper was placed on and absorbing the copied seal, though this meant it could only be used once. It was the creation of the Fuinjutsu Division by the Deputy Division Head to combat the threat of trap seals. The Rinnegan King ripped off the successfully copied Hiroshin seal and crumpled it in his fist, setting it on fire and repelling Minato before he could flash to their position. Back in Kushina's former room, the yandere was suddenly thrown back the room by a swirling vortex he had momentarily flashed in, his cloak singed at the sleeves and soot in his blonde hair. While his ninjas rushed to him to see what had happened, Naruto walked back to his frozen-in-time sister and masked subordinate. He allowed time before his eyes to move normally again, and the two sharply looked to him. "We have 2 minutes before they arrive," he said, and ushered them to the vehicle. He snapped his fingers, ignoring the soldiers in the vehicle that snapped to their feet in a salute before bending onto their knees, placing their hands over their hearts and inclining their heads down. Nora rushed to the seat directly behind the driver's section of the vehicle, where there were a total of 30 seats in the vehicle, and hit the seat. It lifted up to reveal a neat black duffel bag and as pulled it out, putting the seat back in place as she ran back to Naruto. She handed it to Naruko in a bow, and the girl graciously took it, still flustered at how respectful she was being treated. "Tell Division Head Karen of the Medical Division that she is to place our mother in a secure room, treat her well and to begin treatment." Karen was a stellar medic. The kingdom did not only have great technological, Fuinjutsu and advancements in civilization, but their medical field had also taken a big leap above what could be seen on the ground. There was a safe, secure and healthy way to heal those that had lost their minds, but Naruto's mother was a bit different. "Also tell Division Head Magi of the Fuinjutsu Division to start fixing the broken seal shackles as soon as our mother is secure." "Yes, sir," Nora said and saluted as Naruto walked out of the vehicle with his sister behind him, carrying the duffel bag of spare clothes and equipment in both of her hands. "Good luck, sir," she called before she bumped the door of the driver's section of the vehicle 3 times with her right fist. The retrieval vehicle began lifting off the ground. The wide open back closed up as they continued their ascent into the sky. The king with his sister kept their eyes on the rising vehicle before it merged with the sky and zipped back to the Tsukai kingdom. "What now?" "I was thinking we spend the night in the hideout of one of my spies near the Fire Country capital before we head over to Rain." Gravity picked up the Rinnegan King and he had it take Naruko up into the air as well before they blasted in a ground-shaking thud of wind towards the capital. The question of how they would get there suddenly lost on the startled girl. The bird was sent back to the summoning realm, but that was fine. It had served its purpose for now. The red-haired twins left the village in a total state of emergency, terror, panic, and paranoia. Underground Akatsuki meeting room. The Amikage Tower. Amigakure no Sato. There were 3 Tsukai spies in the Akatsuki, 2 of who shared the same experience in how they changed allegiances and 1 who had been recruited much longer. As the leader of the S-rank organization spoke, one of the Tsukai spies narrowed his eyes and his mind wandered back to when he had been recruited by the legendary king of the Tsukai kingdom. It was 5 years ago, when the remarkable godly boy was only 11. Art was something that lasted forever and ever, unchangeable, incorruptible and indestructible. That was the philosophy Sasori of the Red Sands lived by since the day he began his study of the puppeteering arts under Lady Chio. Art was immaculate. Art was eternal. Art was forever. Art could not die. I hear you are a great spy master, a low voice said above his broken body. The redhead's eyes flickered open and he tried to move, but there were solid black rods impaled through every joint in his arms and his legs. The presence of the rods disrupted his chakra painfully. The S-rank missing ninja saw that he was still in his regular clothes, besides the tears from the black chakra rods, and like that he realized that after 5 minutes of continuous effort he had been easily bested by this person without much effort. He felt like the person had even allowed him to attack to make him realize that it would never work against him. The puppet man had been in mountain country after then a mountain lion that he felt would be a great addition to his arsenal, but after climbing into a cave on the side of the mountain the people of the country reported the creature resided he was met with a calm red-haired child sitting on the bleeding corpse of the lion he sought. After that he allowed his frustration from weeks of searching to flood out in the form of his puppets. The Kazekage puppet was nailed to the ceiling of the cave with at least 50 of those black rods. His Hirako puppet lay at the very back of the cave, shattered to pieces, too broken to be salvaged from an invisible crushing force that had the puppet man inside escape before he get crushed with it. All of the 100 puppets of his 100-puppet technique were nailed to the walls and the ground of the cave with at least one rod, like they were mere ornaments to the boy. He had been bested like he was child by a child, dragged to the boy by a great pulling force and slammed into the ground with a choke slam that would surely have killed any other living creature, because, despite the fact that he could feel no sensation from his wooden body, he still knew that the mountain he was in bowed as his back hit the ground. He was then summarily impaled with the rods, ending his control over his chakra. Sasori hummed stoically and looked up. His eyes clashed with a pair of orbs that held so much power that every thought in the prodigious mind of the puppet master fizzled to a stop. His light brown eyes enlarged slowly and his puppet mouth fell open. Coal black with red concentric rings. A face so pale and so immaculate it glowed, even in the dark of the cave. Red hair that seemed to sway in the non-existent breeze. Expressionless and cold while at the same time exuding power and commanding respect. The only words the infamous puppet master could after 5 long minutes at staring at this godly child were, "You are art!" The boy narrowed his eyes and Sasori, for the first time in years, feared for his life. He clenched his eyes shut tightly and whispered, "You are beauty, you are perfect, you are art!" The person was silent after that, until he said again, "I hear that you are a great spy master." "Yes, my lord. The best on the continent," the puppet man said as he eagerly nodded, his once dead eyes glowing at the acknowledgement. "How may I be of service to my lord?" A small, barely visible twitch came to Naruto's lips. "I want you to be my eyes and ears on the ground." That time Sasori immediately concluded that the boy was a god. "I will do anything to make my lord pleased." The interests of the perfect art had to be protected. And as long as he lived he will protect those interests with all his power. "Good. You will hear from me soon." The person stood up straight and made to leave, his feet lifted off the ground as he prepared to rocket into the sky, but the red-haired puppet man stopped him with a hurried yell. "If I may be so forward, my lord, what is your name?" The person looked down at him and Sasori fell onto his knees instinctively, placing his right hand over his heart and tilting his head to the ground. "My name is Naruto. I am the king of the Tsukai kingdom." 2 years later he had been invited to the great kingdom in the sky and immediately the puppet man had felt even more humbled to have been privileged to attract the attention of the king. He became the deputy head of the espionage and infiltration with Yuakuso as the head. He had also been given a gold rank under armor, which the red-head puppet man wore with pride under his Akatsuki robes. The unbreakable armor did not hinder his creation of puppet strings in any way. He reported everything to his new master. As soon as he got wind of an S-rank organization and he had received an offer to be among the higher ranks he immediately sent word to Naruto about it, and inquired what to do next. This was a year before he was given his gold rank. He was ordered to agree, and a few months later 2 spies of the Tsukai kingdom in the Akatsuki were added. Sasori, what have your spies said about this rising threat, the kingdom hidden in the sky? Nagato asked him from the head of the meeting room, on his throne. Konan stood beside her childhood friend, her eyes looking towards Sasori, as were the others. The spy master had been given the role as chief informant of the rogue organization. The red-haired gold-rank spy hummed from deep inside his Hirako puppet. A spy in Kumo told me that the king and his forces marched in without being detected and brought the village under his control before the Reikage noticed. The leader of the organization and the Angel of Aim remained stoic, but a few of the others' expressions were vaguely surprised. Sasori continued. Roughly 5,000 of the Tsukai forces arrived, but only 1,000 actually took over. An informant told me that they were all Jounin in rank at least. He allowed their imaginations to fill in on what he was implying. As far as the reports go, they say that their armor is impenetrable, their skills are unparalleled, and their king. The puppet master tapered to a stop, unsure of whether he should continue or not. Yes? What of their king? Itachi asked, speaking for the first time since the meeting began. The wooden man remained silent, but spoke when an order from the head of intelligence and interrogation came to his mind. Make them aware of who we are and of the might of our great king. The king of the Tsukai kingdom, he has the Rinnegan. There was a painful silence after he spoke as they all gaped at him. His words and his informants had so far helped the organization, but to go as far as saying that the king of the Tsukai kingdom had a Rinnegan, it was too far-fetched. But his eyes, I apologize for saying this, leader, his eyes are much more powerful than yours. His puppet passed a photo of the king to his right towards the leader, and Nagato narrowed his eyes at the picture of Naruto holding the Reikage by his neck, hovering over the village. The picture had been taken by a bronze-ranked hunter ninja and had been given to the spy of the puppet man before the Tsukai left. Kisame stifled his laugh in a cough. How can there be 2 Rinnegan at a time? I do not know. I can only speculate that he had the genes in him to activate the eyes. The specific genes, though, I do not know what they are. Kakuzu then asked his own question. How are you so sure his eyes are greater than leaders? Besides merely looking at it, Sasori said, exaggerating his words. True, the black with red rings looked more intimidating than purple with black rings, but he saw that they needed more proof. My informants in spring told me that he was able to grab hold of the daimyo's neck from several feet away. That isn't proof. He was able to crush the heads of her ninjas without a serious thought. The members were not aware of the full power of the Rinnegan, so even if Sasori kept listing out his observations, they still might not believe him. Still, if he was able to do that, then who was to say that if they faced him they stood a chance? They will know art soon. His eyes flicked to the 2 other spies and they shared secret looks. Most of them were not aware, but the king of the Tsukai kingdom and his revived sister were going to enter the Rain village the next day. He had ordered Sasori to keep them all in the village until he arrived, while he stayed the night in the spy master's fire country hideout with his sister. Off at the far end of the meeting, standing opposite Setsu and beside Deidara, who stood beside Sasori, Obito forced down his grin. If this king's Rinnegan is more powerful than Nagato's, then I will have no more need for him. His hands tightened in suppressed excitement. And I can have his army too. Kato Amatsukami is a very powerful jutsu. Chapter 11. Onitochi Countryside. Outskirts of the Fire Country capital. Fire Country. Sir, I still insist that there are better living conditions in the capital that are far better than my hideout, Sasori said in a low, hurried voice. He was hunched over inside his Hirako puppet as he passively walked with his puppet. Deidara was prattling on about something he couldn't care to listen to. I have not used that hideout in several years, my lord. Surely you will prefer lodging in the capital. I will pay for it myself. Naruto placed his hands on his hips and looked up at the wooden shack before him. It was as wide as his arms outstretched, and as tall as his arms over his head. The small building looked like it was falling apart from the termites and the small colony of bees inhabiting it. There was clumps of weeds around the shack, but as he looked around there were only trees for miles around until the capital walls, which was about 3 kilometers away from where he stood, securely shaded by the trees around him, a few of which Sasori planted himself. This clued them in on the age of the hideout. The king wasn't startled when he felt his sister slink her arms through his own and hug his side, settling her head onto his shoulders and smiling peacefully. "This feels familiar," she said and nuzzled her nose into her brother's neck. Naruto nodded as he replied. "They used to live in a rat hole like this, but this place was 100 times better." "Yes. But this is better." He voiced his thoughts. His sister agreed. "Is there a security system, Sasori?" "Yes, sir. A mere chakra sensor seal that allows me entry once I am near it." "What of a backdoor seal?" Naruto didn't have any of the puppet man's chakra handy with him, and it was in the middle of the night, so finding a way to get it was way out of the question. "There is a key under the floorboard inside. I have that in case I am low on chakra. That will be all. Stay vigilant, Sasori," Naruto said, and the red-haired puppet man bowed with his hand over his heart seal as he answered, hidden inside his Hiriko puppet body. "Of course, sir." The king cut the connection and hefted the black duffel bag his sister dropped before them with his left arm, slung it over his shoulder, and walked towards the shack. Naruko pried open the door with her right arm and winced when it collapsed inside. Naruto waved her concerns away. "Sasori won't mind." The interior was as small as he had guessed, forcing him to separate from his sister and walk in by himself. The floorboards creaked in agony and his Rinnegan flashed in the dark, directing him to a loose floorboard at the very center. He lifted up the board with his foot, and the key flew into his hand. After that there was a second long tremble that had the hairs at the back of Naruko's neck stand on end. 3 floorboards at the far back of the tiny shack slide aside to reveal a stairwell winding downwards. He felt his sister reach in and grab his shoulder as he began his walk down the narrow stairs. She followed after him and trusted in his ability to anticipate danger because the narrow space was giving her terrible flashbacks. She clenched her eyes shut and allowed her brother to protect her. They soon got to the bottom of the staircase, and there was a low buzz before the lights fizzled on to reveal a fairly large room about 4 times as large as the Hokage's office. There were 3 work tables at the very center of the room, joined together by strongly welded bars but at the same time separated enough to show that they were initially different tables. On the joined tables were wooden and metal parts of unfinished puppets, a few of which were weaponized body parts like a hidden section of an arm with kunai launchers or a toxic green eye that spat out acid. There were also completed of unfinished puppets hanging on the walls, peering at them in frozen positions and gathering dust. Strangely enough, there were no cobwebs and not that much dust in the hideout. Naruto's Rinnegan eyes scanned around for any traps his servant forgot to mention, because it looked and felt like it hadn't been used in years, and his eyes fell at the far back where a cylindrical glass container stood that touched the ceiling. The container was wedged into the wall with a red and blue knob outside it to the left and fairly large nozzle at the top. His eyes hopped over the container and went to the far left of the workshop/hideout of the Red Scorpion, where a large banner of the missing ninja was pasted on the wall in blood-red paint, a terrifying but at the same time simple-looking red scorpion. Under it were wooden parts of a bed that lay haphazardly in the wall and a mattress toppled over the parts. The king felt his sister tighten her grip on his shoulder, and he instinctively placed his hand over hers, squeezing it gently and coaxing her, without speaking, to open her eyes. The girl's bright purple eyes opened and enlarged as she looked around. The place was well lit, and it didn't look like it was falling apart, unlike its deceptive exterior, but the puppets hanging on the walls, simply staring at them, made the girl frown. "Sasori of the Red Sands is one of my most trusted grounder subordinate. He is an S-rank missing ninja from Sunagakure that defected after killing the Sandaime Kazekage, but he submitted to my will after I had proved without a shadow of a doubt that I was a superior." His sister's hand slid down his left arm and laced with his fingers. The king dropped the duffel bag on the ground and allowed his sister to walk around the hideout, peering up at the puppets on the walls with odd fascination, while at the same time listening raptly to her brother speak. He is such a great puppet master that he found a way to trade his mortal body with that of an undying, wooden one that is able to do things that normal puppet masters would even dream of being able to do. For instance, he is one of the only people that make use of human puppets with regular wooden puppets to fight. She nodded and looked at him with deeply furrowed eyes, watching her brother explain something she didn't need to voice. Who the hell had this kind of hideout? It looked like something their dead godfather would do, but Naruto was reassuring her that it was not. I'm going to guess that this was possibly the last place Sasori was ever truly human. He motioned to the mattress and the parts underneath it. Because since he isn't flesh and blood but wood, metal and chakra, he doesn't need sleep, only as long as he has the chakra. The twins walked hand in hand around the tables in the center of the room. Naruko gently ran her fingers over the parts so as not to set off any traps, but Naruto shook his head, with her seeing it from the corner of her eyes, telling her that the traps on the parts were long since deactivated. She crinkled her nose and Naruto smiled a little. I'm going to guess he's a weird guy. She then smiled at him playfully. And I don't mean to offend. Crass at times she may be, but she still tried her best to behave politely to those that served her brother. Besides, Sasori was kind enough to allow them to stay the night in his hideout. The least she could do was be nice, even though the puppet man was not present. He is a bit eccentric, but nothing bad, I assure you. They stopped in front of the glass cylinder, and the girl eased her hand out of his own. She shimmied the blood-stained red dress off her body and slipped closer to Naruto, who raised an eyebrow, mirroring her teasing gaze. Her naked body pressed up against him. It looks like it has enough room for two. Apparently it does, he said, and her smile stretched wider, her pristine teeth gleaming up at him, and he grinned back. You want to do something? I want to try that thing Orochimaru did with Kabuto, she whispered suggestively, and lightly trailed her pointer finger up his under-armored belly, creeping up his chest and settling on his chin. I can be Kabuto and you. She leaned up and Naruto tilted his head down a little, almost closing the gap between them. His right arm wound around her and pulled her closer, forcing a small gasp from her but not enough to reduce the grin on her face. He could see a deep red blush spread over her nose as she continued, pressing her body even tighter into his. You can be Orochimaru. She was talking about the time, halfway during a mind-numbing blood experiment on the twins that happened at the same time and in the same room by the godfather and his assistant. Orochimaru had slithered up behind Kabuto and tore off the latter's pants. The man and the younger man had assumed that the children before them were too out of it to notice, but the twins were part Uzumaki. Apparently Orochimaru had a lot of pent-up sexual frustration in him, and seeing as they now had a chance, he pushed Kabuto up a wall and had his wicked way with him. The silver-haired man didn't object, far from it really, and the snake man went at it for an hour before he finally allowed Kabuto to slump onto the ground. It was nightmare-inducing, cringe-worthy, foul, disgusting and fascinating to the twins. Not that it was a guy going at it with a guy, but more because of the sick things Orochimaru did and made Kabuto do. Why snakes? Why snakes? Naruto could feel himself getting hotter at the thought of doing that to Naruko. He didn't want to spoil the mood, or wave away the heavy smell of desire that was permeating from her body, by telling his sister that the glass wall-embedded cylinder wasn't a shower but rather a high-pressure power wash that was used to disinfect metals. It was strong enough to rip skin from bone. But she didn't need to know that. He knew more than a few water jutsus that would stop her from noticing. Naruko snaked her other arm up and around his neck, biting her bottom lip and crushing her budding breasts into his chest as she whispered, "You can do!" She leaned up and whispered into his left ear, sending wonderful waves down his back and making his arms hold her tighter. "Whatever you want to me." Damn. She easily pulled away from him and turned around before he could catch a glimpse of her breasts, though looking at her cute pale white but slink sway a little as she walked into the power wash. The small specks of blood on her body merely drove his mind off the edge. She looked over her shoulder and Naruto gulped at the desire in her eyes. He wasted no time throwing off his clothes, slapping his chest with his hand, and his obsidian under-armor shivered and crumpled, falling down to his boots, which he removed in a hurry as he walked to her. His hand shot to Naruko's black duffel bag still sitting at the base of the staircase, and it unzipped. A bar of deep green soap zipped out and entered his hand just as he stepped into the power wash. His right hand waved above them as she placed her hands on the wall, looking at him with large purple eyes over her shoulder, and he thought of AB rank water jutsu. Water release, rainmaker. Dark clouds collected above their heads and began dropping gentle drops of water on their bodies. Naruko flipped around and panted as Naruto pinned her to the white tiled wall behind her. Whatever I want, huh? 1 hour later. Bro? Naruko asked from the middle on the room, perched on one of the 3 tables. She was in a red shirt with black ninja pants and black sandals. It wasn't something she really liked wearing, but since her brother was wearing a variation of it, then she didn't mind much. Her long red hair was tied up in a shortened ponytail that draped over her left shoulder, and she crossed her slender legs. Her bright purple eyes were looking intently at Naruto, who was sitting on another table beside her with his legs crossed, his palms together in the ram hand seal and his elbows jutting outwards. His godly eyes were closed and his back was in a rigid posture, and it looked like he wasn't breathing at all. He peeked open an eye and smiled faintly before he closed them again. What are you doing? I had to do a lot of things before I got to this very moment. I killed Orochimaru. I started a successful, highly advanced kingdom in the sky. I control the greatest army on the planet, and I have the unquestioned admiration of all my people. I even killed Danzo. Thing is... His lips screwed to the side and he sighed. They were things we were supposed to do together. Naruko's shoulders sagged and she smiled sadly at her brother. Her right hand reached forward and gently touched his left knee. Oh bro, it's fine. I might not have been, alive when you did all those things, but I really don't mind. You did those things to make our dreams come true. Our dreams. He rubbed his knee and he opened one black with red ringed eye, flashing a shaky smile at her. You could have killed father all by yourself, and it wouldn't change anything. I know. You still haven't told me what you're doing. She shuffled closer and fully turned to him, mirroring his sitting posture and leaning towards him curiously. Her large eyes sparkled as she listened. I'm not completely sure you've heard the full story, but father and mother were attacked by a mysterious, masked assailant when we were born, and this masked man ripped out the kyubi, making mother go crazy. Naruko nodded and urged him to keep going, even as his eyes stayed closed in concentration. Can you imagine what life for us would have been like if that never happened? I can, not sure I would like to change it, but it would have been nice to have 2 loving parents. I agree, given how far I have gone with our ambitions and our dreams, then this version of outcomes is much better than if he didn't attack. I'm saying that I have a small hunch on where that masked man is. She cocked her head to the side and furrowed her eyebrows cutely. You think you found him? Remember that lady that gave you the duffel bag of spare clothes and equipment? Naruko bobbed her head up and down. She is a division head. There are 10 division heads for the Tsukai forces and 1 division head for the civilians. He paused in case she was still trying to figure out what he was saying. She motioned for him to keep talking. One of my division heads, Ichiraku, is the head of espionage and infiltration. That means he looks over all the spies I have in every country and every underground organization, like I had a mole in Konoha that was directly under Danzo, and that old idiot never even suspected it. Even though his eyes were still closed, the twins shared a sinister grin. It was always nice to hear that they had outsmarted one of the wisest people in Konoha. My point is, there's an S-rank organization with about 10 missing ninjas making up their ranks, all of whom are S-rank. I have 3 spies in their ranks. Ichiraku keeps me updated with anything the spies are not able to tell me themselves, but I placed a side mission on 2 of my spies there, besides gathering tailed beasts. He was silent for a moment as his grin slipped off his face and dropped to neutral as his face relaxed. What was the mission? The girl asked after a short while. I wanted them to investigate if any person in their ranks was in any way connected with the Kyubi attack 16 years ago. Shinokora, the human form of the Nine-Tails soul. She nodded quickly, meaning that she was aware of who the combat maid was and of her rank in the kingdom as the right hand of the king. She regularly contacts them on any memory of that night, because she found it hard remembering the exact details because she was in a genjutsu. After a harmless hypnosis session from Hamato Toshi, my head of intelligence and interrogation, he is very adept in hypnosis to gather information from people, she was able to recall a few vital pieces of information from that night that made it easier to zero in on the masked man's identity and whereabouts. Naruko scratched her chin and tilted her head down as she thought deeply. Naruto sensed this and kept quiet, allowing her to her thoughts until she wanted him to continue. The girl didn't really care much about what would have happened if their birth wasn't ruined by the masked man. It all ultimately turned out fine, but she would be lying if she said she didn't hold a little bit of resentment to the man for doing what he did. The man had been the direct reason their mother lost her mind and possibly why they were alienated in Konoha. Naruto had been put through a lot of deep grief and depression after her death, and that was something that made her blood boil. She clenched her fists and ground her teeth before closing her eyes and copying the hand seal Naruto was holding, flooding her body with chakra to ease out her tension, a variation of a trick a sound ninja had taught her during a chakra-enhancing lesson. She breathed out and said, remaining in the exact same position as her brother, facing him like they were opposite sides of a mirror. "Keep going, please." She said that he had the Sharingan, that she was able to remember his chakra among one of father's students during her time inside Kushina, and lastly, he called himself Madara Uchiha. He could feel her frown lightly and question. History lessons were not the agenda of their training with Orochimaru, just physical and mental training, and the ever-so-frequent torture sessions, so she was not aware of who Madara was. But Naruto, on the other hand, had the memories of Orochimaru of the Sannin, as well as a whole host of other ninjas he had acquired during one of his older expeditions of the ground. He also had the time to study extensively. The boy decided to expand a bit on Madara. He is an old ninja that fought the first Hokage, Hashirama Senju, well over 100 years ago. He even used the Kyuubi back then, just like this Madara used the Kyuubi 16 years ago. I'm doing the math. Naruko muttered under her breath, and Naruto listened in. If what you're saying is correct, then that person claiming to be Madara is an imposter because, seeing as the real Madara fought the first about 100 years ago, and let's assume they were in their late 40s when that happened, then he should be well and truly dead. No ninja, or human being, is able to stay kicking longer than 120 years, and since that guy claiming to be Madara was able to fight almost evenly with father then. She hummed and pursed her lips. He's either a blood clone or a fan. That's right, Naruto said and beamed at her. Their eyes were closed, but the girl could obviously sense his smile, and a light dusting of red covered her nose as she blushed. My people in the Akatsuki, that's the name of the S-rank organization, were able to use those 3 vital pieces of information to lock onto one of their members, the one who supposedly gathered all of them together and created the Akatsuki. All that's left is for him to verbally admit to attacking Konoha with the Kyuubi 16 years ago. Naruto inhaled through his nose and exhaled through his mouth. I was thinking, as a way of apologizing for killing Orochimaru and Danzo by myself. Naruko sighed and shook her head in exasperation. Naruto, bro. That you could kill him yourself. He then hurriedly added. I know killing him won't be able to replace Orochimaru and Danzo, but dash. Naruko's giggling cut him off. I thought I told you it was fine. He didn't reply, and she sighed again. Okay, I'll kill him, if it will make you happy. She smiled with him. After that we can dismantle the Akatsuki and go and have ice cream back home. Her eyes shot open and she grinned widely at her twin. Who's the best brother in the world? You are. She pumped her fist in the air as she cheered. The best twin I could ever ask for. Naruto's lips wiggled as he smiled. Ah, you're just saying that. She grabbed his shoulders and pulled him into a strong hug. Even as his hands stayed in the seal and his eyes were closed, the boy still grinned happily. I mean it. I promise you won't regret it, bro. She released him and hopped off the table, skidding over to the duffel bag lying on the ground beside the stairwell leading into the hideout. She opened it and pulled out a standard tanto, easing it open a bit more, and saw 36 kunai, shuriken, a katana, a foldable bow staff, 2 rolls of bandages, 6 boxes of ration packs, 1 more pair of spare clothes with smaller clothing accessories like a scarf, gloves, boots, underwear, and a basic medical kit for those that weren't able to use medical jutsu. I'm going to refresh my skills. She hooked the kunai pouch on her left thigh and her shuriken pouch on her right hip, twirling the tanto in her left hand as she moved across the room to a human-sized puppet hanging on the wall. Would your spy mind if I used one of his puppets as a training dummy? He won't mind, Naruto replied with a lax shrug. The girl with the adamantium bones hefted off the puppet as she stood on the tips of her toes and lugged it close to the table in the center of the room, behind her brother. She found a stand and hung the puppet there. Her eyes narrowed and she bounced on her heels, holding the lethal blade in a reverse grip, clenching a kunai in her other hand that pointed at the forehead of the dummy. She puffed out a breath and said in a low voice, "You still haven't told me what you're doing." Naruto laughed lowly and opened one eye. "I'm attending an Akatsuki meeting through one of my most loyal spies." Hundreds of miles away. Underground Akatsuki meeting room. Amikage Tower. Amigakure no Sato. Black chakra rods were one of the abilities bestowed on a Rinnegan user through the less physical outer path. It could be used to destabilize the chakra of any person it was inserted into. Seeing as it was made of a very hard material, then it could be weaponized, and it could also be used to have limited control of the person it was inserted in. But this was only if the person had given the Rinnegan user express permission, or if the person the rods were inserted in was dead. The 6 paths of pain were all dead corpses peppered with chakra receivers, smaller versions of chakra rods, and imbued with a single path of the Rinnegan excluding the outer path, especially seeing as the outer path was the one that kept all paths of pain in sync with pain/Nagato. Naruto preferred not to imbue paths into dead bodies but used them himself. He was more effective that way, but there were small exceptions to this decision. "Conan!" A voice called and the woman turned her head to her right, looking at the skeletal red head sitting on the throne. He had Rinnegan eyes, but not as powerful or as ominous as Naruto's, purple with black rings. He wheezed lightly and released the breath he was holding. The angel of aim looked back in front of her at the mirror and breathed in deeply as well. She saw herself reflected back at her, but with only one small distinct change: she had a black with red ringed left eye. The stoic angel felt her heart flutter and she clasped her hands over her chest, almost overwhelmed with pride and joy as Naruto, after many years of not using her, had finally chosen to use the 6 chakra receivers in her ears, 3 in each one on her chin and the last one through her belly button. "Master!" she gushed in a breathy voice, going against her persona of stoic angel as she felt her normal right eye film over with tears as she saw Naruto's one-of-a-kind Rinnegan. Nagato weakly smiled and relaxed into his throne. He had been worried there was something wrong as soon as Conan had fled to the standing mirror in the throne room, barely minutes before all the Akatsuki members were to be physically present. The woman turned to her longtime friend and smiled a little, the biggest and happiest smile she had ever shown him in more than a decade. "Master is finally using me, Nagato." The sickly man closed his eyes and sighed. "I take it you don't mind. It is an honor and a privilege to be our great king's eyes and ears," she said in a firm but shaky voice, turning back and slowly lifting her fingers to under her left eye, both marveling at it and fearful of it. There weren't enough chakra rods in her body to allow Naruto to fully control her, but with the ones he implanted in her, with her express permission, he was able to see through her eye and influence her thoughts in his favor. Though, given how happy she was to be the eye of her king, he didn't need to influence her that much. She stood up straight and faced the mirror, bowing deeply and saying in a light voice, "I am humbled, my lord Naruto." She didn't get any reply, but that only made the stoic woman gush even more. "Put on the contacts. No one but Sasori must know that our lord is in attendance," Nagato said, and the woman hurriedly slipped out a finger-sized square from inside her cloak. She muttered quick apologies to the silent king as she put the contacts on. They were light gray in color and perfectly hid Naruto's Rinnegan eye. "If our lord has decided to grace us with his magnificent presence, then it must be time." Conan nodded and rubbed her face to smoothen down her features, fighting the urge to smile again. She pushed the mirror and it flipped upside down on the wall, changing into a grayish-black painted wall of the meeting room. They could hear walking from several feet in front of them at the door, and their eyes went there. Sasori of the Red Sands, deputy head of espionage and infiltration, walked in with his wooden face set in neutral. Nagato nodded his greeting to the fellow spy, as well as made a circle with his right index and thumb, like turning an invisible knob, and Sasori stopped at the door abruptly, making Daidara slam into his Hirako puppet's back as the mad bomber was rushing after the puppeteer, telling him a story. Sasori's eyes widened in surprise and he subtly cocked his head to the right, to Conan, and she also nodded. They could see the wooden man suppress a shiver and march forward as well, taking his place on the right side of the long meeting table, 3 seats away from the leader of the Akatsuki. Deidara, sorely rubbing his nose and muttering insults to his partner, stood 2 seats away from Nagato as Conan took her place at her friend's right side, tilting her chin up slightly and looking all parts the regal and lethal angel of aim. More and more S-rank ninjas trooped in and Nagato stayed in perfect character, looking down at each to them with his purple with black ringed Rinnegan eyes. Inside his head though, he vividly remembered the day he and his childhood friend, as well as all of Amigakure, were recruited into the ranks of the Tsukai forces. It was 5 years ago and the Akatsuki was still just made up of Nagato, Conan, Obito, and Sasori, most of whom were hundreds of miles away from Hidden Rain, finding and recruiting other qualified S-ranks to their criminal organization. The sickly redhead had stayed back with his childhood friend to administer to their village when suddenly they felt a great disturbance pass through the village's borders and walk into the rain. Back then, Naruto was just 11 years old. Flashback. The whole village was quaking to its very core as the intruder passed the rain dome covering the village. Naruto was in a long-sleeved dark blue shirt with black pants, brown ninja boots and holding an umbrella over his head. The powerful child had an amused but chillingly cold smile plastered on his face as he walked, protected from the chakra rain by his very much normal bright red umbrella. His boots splashed in the small puddles but it never dissuaded him. He had been on a personal excursion to every ninja village that Orochimaru had listed as mysterious and too dangerous to be attacked, like Kirigakure, Hidden Darkness, Hidden Smoke and lastly Hidden Rain. There were other smaller villages Orochimaru had been cautious about but the man still went to and fro them, even keeping labs full of slaves, which Naruto liberated and sent back to the Tsukai kingdom hovering high in the sky over the ocean close to Kumo. But the information gathering was not out of pleasure but rather to gather the information his godfather was too afraid to get himself in order to make his budding kingdom in the sky stronger. The information and knowledge he had gathered from all the other villages were of great help and he summarily sent it back to Hamato Toshi, head of intelligence and interrogation, so that the older ninja could better explain it to the other division heads, who would in turn train the soldiers to handle those situations. Amigakure no Sato was the very last village. It was also the place his spy, Sasori, had told him a budding criminal organization was being formed. He could already feel the great unrest his presence was causing and he didn't care very much about it. With each step he created shockwaves that shook the village but didn't make it all crumble, like he could very well easily do. He released less than a quarter of his control of over-suppressing his chakra and that was enough to create a bonfire of hazy chakra around his body for those that could sense chakra. It was like what he did with all the other dangerous hidden villages he had visited. He wanted them to see his threat level and come at him with all they have so that he could observe, test, and send back the results to the kingdom. His division heads and his people were less than happy to allow their king leave their home without the proper protection, but they dutifully obeyed his order for them to stay back and develop the kingdom. Just a year ago Naruto had cut Hidden Sound, as well as every other connecting laboratory or slave pen, off the map by himself and himself alone. It was obvious he could protect himself. It didn't mean they had to like it. The villages he entered never let out the knowledge to other villages, even their allies, because of their great pride that a preteen had marched in and overpowered their ninjas. It was shameful. Naruto stopped when he felt 7 great chakra signatures shooting towards him with a small army of lesser important chakra signatures flooding after them. Naruto's eyes flickered and a dome of energy stemming from the Preta path covered his body as 3 missiles were blasted at him. The warheads were summarily snuffed out and clanked on the ground, dead and empty. The ground broke apart, and a sharp rock burst out, slashing into the chest of a mountain-sized ape that had attempted to fall down on him from the sky. The boy scoffed when he felt a tug on his shirt. He tightened his hand on his umbrella's handle, which still covered him from rain, and the ground exploded outwards around him, shredding the universal pull that had been attempted on him. The dust settled and Naruto's felt a small smile come to him when his eyes fell on the 6 village defenders and the 7th hovering above them with paper wings. They had the Rinnegan, purple with black concentric circles. His smile threatened to stretch wider when he felt another tug on his shirt. His eyes widened and flashed to one of the paths. The Deva path of pain gasped out in surprise and shot towards Naruto. The boy lifted his other hand and rolled his wrist. The path spun around the child with blinding speed before Naruto stopped the motion and pointed at the flying paper woman, sending the body of the path over there with the speed of a bullet. The path cracked his head on the head of the Angel of Aim, sending both of them into the side of the Kage's tower. The Deva path's head was caved in, and Konan's head was fractured. She was unconscious. Naruto hummed with his eyes sparkling with childish joy, and the ground opened up beneath the human and Naraka paths, swallowing them up until their necks. He flicked his wrist again and an invisible force smashed against the head of a centipede that was charging at him, destroying the animal's summons and spraying its green blood in the air. Naruto's palm faced the airborne path and the child inaudibly brought him straight down into the ground. Thump! Naruto clenched his fist and dragged it back, like he was about to punch the air, and the ground broke apart as the animal path was violently pulled towards the bearer of the superior Rinnegan. The boy caught the path by his neck and slammed him into the ground in a choke slam without hesitation, cracking his neck. The Preta path felt a perspiration form on his forehead despite the rain pouring on him. Watching how the other paths were taken down was like watching a puppet show. Not once did the child with the umbrella utter a word. Something that made the other Rinnegan user feel weak was that the boy was using the abilities of the Rinnegan, but the boy was using them with so much skill and experience. He was almost tempted to think that the boy was older than him. The path grunted as his arms were ripped out of their sockets and his knees were blasted out from beneath him in a glorious shower of blood. Like the animal path, he felt a bone-wrenching yank that threw him straight into the waiting hands of the other Rinnegan user. Naruto held the path by his hair and dragged him on the ground as he began his walk towards the trembling ninjas. The AIM ninjas could not express their sheer shock at watching the strongest ninjas in their village get manhandled like a group of babies. Tossed around like meat bags to a ravenous, untiring, powerful dog. More than a few fled, while the others held their weapons with shaking hands. Hergergaga! Naruto didn't turn his head when he heard the war cry of the Azura path, the last path to be dealt with. He grasped the armless, legless path's hair in his left hand and swung it at the Azura path. He released the hair and pointed his palm at the stunned path as he caught the other path easily. Almighty, push! Naruto whispered, and the only way Nagato could describe the feeling was that an invisible foot had stepped on him and ground the Azura and Preta paths to paste. Naruto nodded at his work and narrowed his eyes at the remaining AIM ninjas. Move! His order was obeyed immediately. Nagato hobbled around his bedroom and pushed open the door but was met with the amused face of the red-haired king. This time Naruto had a closer look and saw the Rinnegan. I see you have the same eyes as me. Naruto started and walked forward. He closed his umbrella and hooked it under his right armpit. The older redhead stumbled away from the boy and stuttered out. No, we don't, your eyes. Naruto stopped as Nagato fell back onto his bed, crawling away from the obviously stronger boys. You truly have the eyes of a god. His hands inched up his face, and he closed his eyes tightly, an inferiority complex that hadn't attacked him since he was a child washed down on him in terrible waves. My eyes are nothing compared to yours. Naruto's lips twitched upwards at the admission of defeat. Then I have one simple proposition for you. Nagato bowed his head and waited for Naruto to continue. Serve me. Flashback end. The only explanation for Conan's fanatic devotion to Naruto was that after her head had almost been split open, something in her brain had clicked. There was no other way of rationalizing why the woman had gotten a loyalty seal as well as tattooed Naruto's name over her heart. Like Sasori, the two were given their ranks, and also like Sasori, they were gold ranks. For their years of loyalty, Naruto had promised to consider not including the people of Hidden Rain in the global tournament, as well as carving AIM out of the ground and temporarily fusing it with the Flying Kingdom. Naruto was hesitant to do so because he did not want any other people, besides his people, being officially or unofficially called the Tsukai citizens. His ground spies were a different case, but to incorporate an entire hidden village to his home? His next best option was having AIM as a separate flying landscape, chained both physically and figuratively to the Tsukai kingdom. He didn't care much if the people of AIM were thought of as lower-tier human beings by his people. He was simply rewarding the loyalty of Nagato and Conan. Despite the uncertainty of making AIM a flying island chained to the Tsukai kingdom, he promised to use his resources to protect the hidden village. This included the soldiers he had stationed in the village and the low-level technology he had allowed the ground ninjas to have. His aim was to keep his fanatically loyal people content, which would in turn keep them loyal. Nagato very well knew that Naruto did not want AIM to fully be incorporated into the Tsukai kingdom, but the lower-powered Rinnegan user was content with having the godly teen's protection over his home. And even though Conan was more or less in the same boat as her friend, she leaned more towards being eternally grateful to Naruto for gracing AIM with his regal presence. It was why she willingly and happily submitted her body and soul to Naruto to use as he saw fit. Nagato was also the person Naruto was able to use to fully confirm that his Rinnegan was possibly the strongest in history. First order of business, Nagato started saying as his powerful Rinnegan eyes shone in the dim lighting of the meeting room. The ghetto statue behind him groaned as it reacted to his eyes, bowing slightly down, and its four open, differently colored eyes brightened. Four-tailed beasts were locked inside it, frozen in helpless stasis. The members of the criminal organization fractionally tilted their heads down in respect for their leaders as he spoke. Zetsu, have you gotten a lead on where the remaining tailed are? Those tailed beasts, as well as their respective holders, had mysteriously disappeared off the surface of the earth. The plant man, who was now just his white half, seeing as the black half stayed on the field to monitor happenings, nodded. Only the three spies knew of where the other beasts were. Setsu lilted in place before he replied. The 2, 3, and 8 mysteriously disappeared after the Tsukai forces attacked their respective villages. I'm assuming they took them back to their kingdom, wherever that kingdom is. The Seven Tails has been in hiding for the past 2 years after Kakuzu and Haiden attacked Waterfall and failed to retrieve her. They don't want another attack, so they threw her out. I was able to follow a trail she had unknowingly left, but strangely enough her trail went cold in Iron Country. My best guess is that she discarded her identity, created an entirely new one, and chose to reside permanently with the samurai, and with her hyperactivity as a tailed beast holder I'm certain she became a samurai. He paused for a moment and peered across the table. He was on the left side, closest to the leader's throne, at Obito, and the masked man chuckled at a joke only he could hear. The plant man looked back to the Rinnegan holder and continued. When I was following her trail, I encountered some strange and unusual. He ran through words in his mind to carefully describe what he was trying to say. Information, for lack of a better word. Nagato stayed silent, as did Conan. The Seven Tails holder spent roughly a week or so in a 5-star hotel in Lightning Country's capital before she kept moving towards Iron Country, which is far, far, far north of Lightning, which is pretty much at the south of the continent. She was able to move from Lightning to Iron, 2 polar locations, in a span of 2 days or so instead of 2 weeks, at best. Setsu scratched his chin in thought. It was like she flew there and only landed on the ground to rest before she took off again because the trail kept flickering as I followed. The seven-tailed beetle has wings, maybe she was able to channel that ability. Kakuzu grunted from his place at the bottom of the left side of the table. I have been watching her since she was a baby. She does not know how to do that with her tailed beast." He then bobbed his head and continued what he had been saying. "And she had no money to her name whatsoever after she had been kicked out. Only the clothes on her back, a kunai pouch and a single water bottle, nothing else. It would literally, and probably physically, require her to cut off an arm, a leg, a kidney and half of her brain to pay for a single night in that 5-star hotel, not to mention a week. I know she stayed a week because I was able to see the logs of the hotel. You think some rich guy, or lady, took her in and paid for stay?" Deidara asked out loud. "That awfully generous, Maybe they were banging the living daylights out of her in the hotel. Like they kidnapped a Chunin Jinchuriki with a fairly high control of her tailed beast and turned her into a sex slave," Kisame said with a laugh. "That's hilarious. He's right, that girl, she was able to give Haiden and I a bit of a problem before reinforcements arrived," Kakuza said. "I didn't say she was turned into a sex slave. I told you I watched that girl grow up. I knew how strong she is and that girl is stubbornly strong," Setsu said factly. "I also remember saying that her trail became cold in Iron Country." He refrained from shouting to stop the amused laughs from the other S ranks, besides the leader and Konan. The plant man straightened his black with red clouds cloak with stiff hands and cleared his throat. "I'm beginning to believe that this Tsukai kingdom has been a major influencer on various phenomenon and events. They had so far shown that they are incredibly formidable, so it is not very hard to believe that they have a large treasury to pay for the girl's hotel room and find a way to transport her up north to Iron. I'm not completely sure, but I think they recruited the girl, helped her change her identity, and set her in Iron as a spy." "Are you sure about this?" Sasori asked. Setsu looked at him sharply and replied, 100%. I might have not been fast enough to catch the Kumo invasion and I just barely saw the Mist invasion, but all of the soldiers are equipped with seals on the soles of their boots that allow them the limited ability to fly, and they have large, metal vehicles that transport soldiers to and fro that can fly. It's not very hard to imagine the Seven Tails was taken into one and transported to Iron. I tried to sneak into one of the vehicles so I could gain entry into the Tsukai kingdom, but I was painfully repelled by seals I never thought would exist. I would have been caught too by the operators of that vehicle if I didn't run away. All this talk of how powerful the emerging kingdom of the sky was only made it more tantalizing for the masked Uchiha. They had not even discussed about the 9 tails. "I want you to go to Iron Country and find the girl, no matter how long it takes. If we find her, then we can take her when the time comes." By this Nagato meant after the 3 tails was found and sealed. But no one besides the 3 insiders knew that that wouldn't ever happen. The Rinnegan leader turned his head from Setsu and looked at Sasori. "Sasori, what have your spies said about this rising threat, the kingdom hidden in the sky?" And the gold-ranked puppet master reported his findings to the group. And that concludes the second part of this story. Thank you for spending your time here at Ichiraku Ramen and listening all the way to the end. Your support helps keep these stories alive and allows the shinobi world to continue through new adventures and alternate timelines. If you enjoyed Child of Hate, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future stories. Once again, full credit goes to Foy the Snooze Button, the original writer of this story. If you would like to read the original version, you can find the link to the story in the description below. Let me know in the comments what story you would like to hear next. Until the next time, stay safe, and I'll see you again at Ichiraku Ramen.